The pine trees whispered ancient secrets as Diana Harper moved through the mist-shrouded forest. Dawn light filtered through the canopy in golden shafts, illuminating her solitary figure as she navigated the familiar path with practiced ease. A woven basket hung from her arm, already half filled with nightshade berries, their purple-black skins glistening with morning dew. These fruits, poisonous to humans but medicinal for shifters, would bring a fair price at her father's apothecary, the one contribution he still accepted from his disappointing daughter. Ravenscroft Valley spread below her as she reached the eastern ridge. The town itself was a study in division. Human dwellings clustered near the river, their simple wooden structures and smoking chimneys a stark contrast to the grand stone houses of the shifter families that dominated the northern slopes. Between them ran the market street, the only place where both worlds truly merged, if only during daylight hours and with unspoken boundaries maintained. Diana paused, inhaling the crisp autumn air. At 23, she had long since accepted her place in this divided world, or rather, her lack of one. Born to the prestigious Harper family, whose wolf bloodline stretched back generations, she alone had failed to shift. The genetic miracle her father called an aberration, the daughter who remained stubbornly, humiliatingly human, while her younger sister Celine had transformed into a magnificent silver wolf at 13. Another day gathering alone, child? Diana turned to find Winston leaning on his gnarled walking stick, his weathered face creased with a gentle smile. The elderly human was Ravenscroft's unofficial historian, tolerated by the shifter community for his vast knowledge of local lore and respected by humans for the same. "The ridge has the sweetest nightshade," Diana replied, returning his smile, "and fewer judgmental eyes." Winston nodded, understanding reflected in his faded blue eyes. At 75, he had witnessed the shifting dynamics between humans and wolves for decades. He had been the only one to offer comfort when Diana, at 13, had stood alone in the forest clearing during the full moon, desperately willing her body to change while the pack watched in growing disappointment. "I brought you something," Winston said, reaching into his worn leather satchel to produce a small, ancient-looking book. "Herbal remedies from before the division. Some interesting combinations your father might not know." Diana accepted the book reverently. "Thank you. I'll study it tonight." The old man's expression suddenly grew serious. "Be careful in these woods today, Diana. There are unusual movements among the Alpha's enforcers." "The tithe collection isn't for another week," Diana said, brow furrowing. "This isn't about the tithe." Winston glanced around before continuing, voice lowered. "Victor Bloodclaw has returned from the capital." Diana felt her blood chill. Victor Bloodclaw, first beta to the Alpha King himself, was a name spoken with both reverence and fear. A warrior whose ruthlessness was legendary, whose loyalty to the old ways was absolute. Why would he come here, she asked, though a sinking feeling told her she already knew the answer. "The Alpha King has refused a mate bond with Princess Aurora of the Eastern Territories," Winston said. "Victor believes this defies the Moon Goddess's will. There are whispers of an ancient ritual, the Silver Challenge, being invoked." Memory flashed in Diana's mind, a childhood lesson about wolf law. The Silver Challenge: when a king defies divine mandate, he must prove his worthiness through suffering. 3 weeks bound in silver chains, alone in the wilderness. If truly worthy, the goddess would send a savior. If not, death would come, and a new king would rise. "Victor bribed the Moon Priestess," Winston continued, confirming Diana's unspoken suspicion. "The divine vision was manufactured, a political scheme to forge alliance with the East, but the king discovered the deception and refused." Diana's hands trembled slightly. "So Victor would rather see him die than lose control." "Power and purity," Winston nodded grimly. "Victor lost his mate and cubs during the territory wars. His hatred for humans runs bone deep. He believes any king who would defy tradition poses a threat to the purity of wolfkind." The memory came unbidden. Diana, at 10 years old, accidentally bumping into Victor during a market day. The cold contempt in his ice-blue eyes as he'd looked down at her. "Keep your human whelp on a tighter leash, Harper," he'd told her father, "or someone might mistake it for prey." "Be watchful today," Winston warned, squeezing her hand. "The forest holds more dangers than usual." After Winston departed, Diana continued her gathering, but his warning echoed in her thoughts. The morning advanced, sunlight strengthening, burning away the mist that clung to the forest floor. She worked methodically, filling her basket with herbs and roots, moving deeper into the woods than she typically ventured. It happened when the sun reached its zenith. The sound that didn't belong, not a wolf's howl or a hunting growl, but something between a whimper and a snarl. Raw, broken, furious, a sound of agony that raised the fine hairs on Diana's arms. Every instinct urged retreat. Wolf sounds meant danger for a human alone in the forest, but the pain in that sound cut through her caution, resonating with something deep inside her. Diana had lived her entire life being overlooked, dismissed as defective. Perhaps that was why she couldn't ignore another's suffering, even if that suffering belonged to a wolf. She followed the sound, moving carefully through dense underbrush, the sweet scent of pine giving way to something acrid and metallic. The forest darkened as ancient trees blocked the sunlight, their massive trunks forming natural columns in this wild cathedral. The snarling whimper grew louder, punctuated by the distinctive hiss and sizzle of burning flesh. The clearing appeared suddenly. Diana froze at its edge, breath catching in her throat. The wolf was massive, impossibly large, even collapsed on its side with ribs heaving painfully. Its fur was midnight black, matted with blood and dirt. But it was the chains that made Diana's stomach turn. Thick silver links wound around its legs, throat, and muzzle, burning into flesh wherever they touched. Silver, deadly poison to shifters, causing excruciating pain where it contacted their skin. Someone had meant for this wolf to die slowly, in agony. The wolf's eye, one eye, because the other was swollen shut, tracked her approach. It was gold, not the typical yellow of wolf eyes, but true gold, like sunlight through honey. In that eye, Diana saw something she recognized intimately: rage, not at her, but at the world, at the injustice of dying alone in the dirt, helpless. "Easy," Diana whispered, though her hands shook violently. She set down her basket and knelt in the leaves several feet away. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that could crush her skull with a single bite. A warning, perhaps, or a plea. "Don't come closer. I don't want to hurt you before I die." But Diana was already reaching for the chains. The silver burned the moment she touched it, a cold fire that sank into her palms like frozen needles. She bit back a scream and kept working, unwinding the links from the wolf's throat first, where she could see it was slowly suffocating. "I know," she gasped, when the wolf made a sound of distress, perhaps at watching her hurt herself. "I know it burns. Almost there." The chain fell away from his throat, and he sucked in a massive breath, his whole body shuddering. That golden eye remained fixed on her with an intensity that made something in Diana's chest contract. She moved to his legs next, then his muzzle, working quickly because she could hear voices in the distance, male voices, laughing, the kind of laughter that accompanies a successful hunt. They had done this. They were coming back to witness the death. The last chain hit the ground, and Diana stumbled backward, her ruined hands clutched to her chest. The wolf didn't move at first, couldn't, probably, just lay there breathing, staring at her with that impossible golden eye. The voices grew closer, hunters returning. "Go," Diana whispered urgently. "Please, they'll kill you if they find you alive." For a moment, it seemed the wolf wouldn't move, whether from pride or pain or exhaustion. Then he surged to his feet in a movement so sudden and powerful it stole Diana's breath. Before she could think, before she could retreat, he was before her, massive, terrifying, beautiful in his primal power. But he didn't attack. Instead, he positioned himself between her and the direction of the approaching voices, protecting her. Their eyes met. His burned with fever brightness, and Diana felt something shift in the air between them. A weight, a pressure, like the world holding its breath. Then he ran, a black shadow melting into the darkening trees, gone so quickly she might have imagined him. Diana had just started wrapping her hands with strips torn from her skirt when 3 hunters emerged from the tree line. They wore the uniform of the Alpha King's enforcers, black leather with silver accents, the wolf and thorn emblem visible on their shoulders. The tallest one, a man with a scar bisecting his face, stopped abruptly when he saw her. His nostrils flared. "You." His voice was gravel and threat combined. "You were here. Where is the wolf?" Diana's heart hammered against her ribs. "What wolf?" His hand shot out, grasping her arm and yanking her forward. His gaze dropped to her blistered, burned hands, then to the silver chains coiled in the leaves like sleeping serpents. His smile was slow, cruel. "You freed the prisoner." She didn't answer, just lifted her chin and met his eyes with every ounce of defiance she'd been accumulating for 23 years. He laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "The Alpha King is going to love you." They dragged her back to the village center, where the autumn tithe was already underway. The entire pack had gathered, hundreds of wolves in human form arranged in family groups, all watching as Diana's father handed over their tribute: gold coins, preserved meats, and 3 bolts of Celine's woven cloth. James Harper saw her, saw the enforcer's hand locked around her arm, saw her burned hands. Diana watched her father's face transform. Fear, calculation, and then, worst of all, resignation. The enforcer threw her to the ground at the feet of his commander, a woman with white blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. "Found her at the Silver Chains," he reported. "She freed him." A murmur rose from the crowd. Diana's mother made a small sound, quickly stifled. Celine grabbed her arm, whether in comfort or restraint, Diana couldn't tell. The commander, Freya, crouched before Diana, studying her face with the detached interest of someone examining an insect. "Do you know who that wolf was, girl?" Diana shook her head. "That," Freya said slowly, "was the Alpha King, Magnus Silverstone. He was chained by his own first beta as punishment for breaking sacred law." She tilted her head. "By freeing him, you've interfered with the king's justice. You've committed treason." The world tilted. The Alpha King. Diana had freed the Alpha King himself. "However," the commander continued, standing, "you also saved his life, which makes you an interesting problem." She looked at Diana's father. "This is your daughter?" "Yes, Commander Freya." Her father's throat worked visibly. "The human one?" The words landed like stones. Her father nodded. Freya smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Then I believe the king will be very interested in claiming his debt. The human girl who freed him from silver chains. What a charming story." She gestured to her enforcers. "Bind her. She's coming to the capital." "No!" Diana's mother's voice, sharp with panic. "Please, she's just a girl. She didn't know." "She made a choice," Commander Freya said coldly. "Now she'll live with it." As they hauled Diana to her feet, she caught her father's expression one final time. Understanding hit her with painful clarity. He was relieved. Relieved it was her they were taking, not Celine. Relieved to be rid of his human embarrassment at last. She had freed a dying wolf from chains, an act of mercy in a cruel world. And mercy, Diana was learning, always extracted a price. They threw her into a cage on wheels, a prisoner's cart bound for Wolfhaven, the heart of the Alpha King's territory. As the cart lurched forward and her village disappeared behind her, Diana pressed her burned palms against the cold iron bars and whispered a truth to the indifferent night. "I should have left him to die." But even as she said it, she remembered that golden eye watching her, that moment when he'd placed himself between her and danger, that impossible weight in the air like destiny taking shape. And she wondered if perhaps she'd been meant to find him all along. The journey to Wolfhaven took 3 days, each mile increasing the distance between Diana and everything she had ever known. The cage smelled of fear and iron. Not her fear, not yet, but the terror of whoever had been imprisoned here before her. Their dread had soaked so deeply into the wooden floorboards that she could taste it on her tongue. Metallic, sour, the kind of fear that comes from knowing you're being delivered to something worse than death. Diana sat with her back against the bars, her burned hands cradled in her lap, wrapped now in cleaner strips provided by the youngest enforcer, the only one who'd shown any kindness. The cart rocked and jolted over forest roads, heading north toward the capital. Commander Freya rode ahead on a massive gray wolf, her enforcers flanking the cart like pallbearers. Through the bars, Diana watched her world transform. The familiar Ravenscroft forests gave way to open plains, then to territories she'd only read about in Winston's books. They passed through smaller pack villages, where wolves stopped to stare at the prisoner cart, their eyes gleaming with curiosity or pity. Children pointed. Mothers pulled them back. On the second night, when they camped in a clearing and the enforcers built a fire just far enough away that Diana could see it, but not feel its warmth, the young enforcer brought her a water skin and a piece of dried meat. "You should have let him die," he muttered, not looking at her as he passed the provisions through the bars. "Would have been kinder to yourself." "Who is he?" Diana asked, her voice rough from disuse. "The king. What did he do to deserve silver chains?" The young enforcer's jaw tightened. For a moment, Diana thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "He refused a sacred bond. The moon goddess herself chose him a mate, a princess from the Eastern Territories. Perfect bloodline, perfect wolf. The union would have secured peace across 3 territories." His eyes finally met hers, and they were hard. He rejected her, said he wouldn't be forced to love anyone, not even by divine command. So the first beta, Victor Bloodclaw, invoked the ancient law. A king who defies the goddess's will must suffer the goddess's punishment. "Silver chains," Diana whispered, "until he relented or died." "Whichever came first." The enforcer stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "You broke a curse that was meant to break him. Whatever happens to you now, you earned it." He walked away before Diana could respond. She sat in the darkness, turning his words over in her mind. The Alpha King had been tortured for refusing a mate, for claiming his own choice mattered more than divine mandate or political alliance, and she'd freed him. Why? The question circled in her thoughts. Why had she touched those chains? But she knew the answer. She'd seen herself in that golden eye, the rage, the helplessness, the absolute refusal to accept that powerlessness meant worthlessness. She'd freed him, because leaving him to die would have been leaving the most authentic part of herself to die as well. Wolfhaven appeared on the horizon at midday on the 3rd day, and it stole whatever breath Diana had left. The city rose from the landscape like a scar, all black stone and silver spires, surrounded by walls that seemed to swallow light. At its center, dominating everything, stood the king's fortress, a massive structure of obsidian and iron that looked less like a palace and more like a clenched fist. Thorn vines crawled up its walls, their silver blossoms glinting like tiny knives. This was a place built to intimidate, to remind everyone who entered that they were small, mortal, breakable. They passed through the outer gates, and the city swallowed them. The streets were crowded, wolves everywhere in human form and shifted. Their pack marks visible on throats and wrists and shoulders, merchants hawking goods, warriors drilling in open squares, children running between buildings with that effortless grace only shifters possessed. And everywhere, eyes watching the prisoner cart, watching Diana. The whispers followed like smoke. "That's her, the human who freed him. Doesn't look like much, won't last a week." They stopped at the fortress gates. Commander Freya dismounted, spoke briefly with the guards, and then the gates opened with a groan that sounded like the earth itself splitting. The cart rolled into a courtyard paved in black stone. Enforcers appeared, more than before, all wearing the thorn-wrapped wolf mark. They surrounded the cart with military precision. The door opened. "Out!" Commander Freya ordered. Diana's legs trembled when she stood. 3 days in a cage did that. But she forced herself to step down without help, to stand straight, even though every instinct screamed at her to make herself small, invisible, forgotten. Freya studied her with those ice-chip eyes. "You'll be taken to the preparation chambers, cleaned, dressed, made presentable." Her lip curled slightly on the last word, as if she doubted it was possible. "The king has ordered an audience at sunset." Diana's stomach dropped. "He's here? Where else would he be?" Freya stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost like pity. "Listen to me, human girl. Whatever you think you did in that forest, whatever mercy you think you showed, forget it. The Alpha King doesn't owe you gratitude. He owes you nothing. And in this place, nothing is exactly what humans are worth." She nodded to the enforcers. "Take her." The preparation chambers were deep in the fortress, accessed through a maze of corridors that seemed designed to disorient. Stone walls, torchlight, the constant sound of water dripping somewhere unseen. They brought Diana to a room carved from rock, dominated by a sunken bath filled with steaming water. 3 women waited there, older wolves with silver-streaked hair and carefully neutral expressions. "Strip," the tallest one said. Not cruel, just matter of fact. Diana wanted to refuse, wanted to cling to some shred of dignity, but her clothes were filthy, torn, and she could smell herself, 3 days of sweat and fear. So she undressed with shaking hands, her burned palms screaming in protest. The women said nothing about her scars, nothing about the way she flinched when they guided her into the bath. They worked with efficient detachment, scrubbing away layers of grime, washing her hair with something that smelled like wintergreen and smoke. One of them, the shortest with kind eyes, carefully unwrapped Diana's hands and made a small sound of distress. "Silver burns," she murmured. "These will scar." "I know." The woman looked up at Diana, and for just a moment her professional mask slipped. "Why did you do it? Free him?" "Because no one should die in chains," Diana said quietly. The woman held her gaze for a long moment. Then she applied a salve to Diana's palms, something cool and numbing, and wrapped them in clean white cloth. "You're braver than you look," she whispered. "Or more foolish. I haven't decided which." They dressed Diana in a gown she never would have chosen. Deep green silk that clung to her frame. Simple but elegant. No jewelry, no adornment. Just the dress and her bandaged hands. A stark reminder of what she'd done. When they finished, they turned her toward a mirror. Diana barely recognized herself. The girl staring back looked almost regal. Her dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders. Her gray eyes, human eyes, no wolf gold, seemed too large for her face. She looked fragile, breakable, terrified. "It's time," the tall woman said. They led her back through the corridors, climbing now, ascending toward the heart of the fortress. Diana's heart hammered against her ribs with every step. In minutes, she would face him. The Alpha King, the wolf she'd freed, the man who now held her fate in his hands. They stopped before massive doors carved with scenes of wolves hunting deer. "He's waiting inside," the kind one whispered. "Remember, eyes down unless he tells you otherwise. Speak only when spoken to, and whatever you do, don't run." The doors opened. The throne room was vast and brutal in its beauty, all black marble and silver accents, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows across the walls. At the far end, raised on a dais, sat a throne made of twisted iron and thornvine, and on that throne sat a man. He was turned slightly away, his profile sharp in the candlelight. Dark hair, broad shoulders. He wore black leather and silver buckles, every inch the warrior king. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. But it was his hands Diana noticed first. They gripped the arms of the throne with white-knuckled intensity, as if he was holding himself back from something. "Come closer," he said. His voice was deep, rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. Diana forced her feet to move. One step, another. The doors closed behind her, with a boom that echoed through the chamber. She walked until she was 20 feet from the dais. Then she stopped and did what the women had told her, lowered her eyes. Silence stretched between them, sharp as a blade. Then she heard him stand. heard his boots on the marble as he descended the steps, coming closer. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat of him, smell cedar and smoke and something wild. "Look at me," he commanded. Diana lifted her eyes, and her breath caught in her throat. His face was beautiful in the way storms are beautiful, dangerous and impossible to look away from. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, lips that looked cruel until you noticed the tiny scar at the corner, softening them. But it was his eyes that destroyed her. Gold, pure burning gold, the same eyes that had watched her from the forest floor. "You," he said slowly, something like wonder and fury mixing in his voice, "are the one who freed me." "Yes," the word barely audible. He reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch back, and took one of her bandaged hands. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he turned it over, studying the white wrappings. "You burned yourself on silver chains." His thumb brushed the edge of the bandage. "Why?" "You were dying." Her voice stronger now. His eyes snapped up to hers, searching. "I was a stranger, a wolf. For all you knew, I deserved those chains." "Maybe," Diana said quietly, "but I don't get to decide who deserves mercy. Only whether I'm the kind of person who gives it." Something flickered across his face, too fast to name. Then his expression hardened into a mask. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked. "By freeing me, you've bound yourself to me. The law is absolute. A life debt must be repaid. You saved me, Diana Harper, which means you belong to me now." Her name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you." He released her hand, stepping back, and suddenly the warmth was gone. "Human daughter of James Harper, born without the wolf, invisible in your own pack, 23 years old and never bonded, never marked, never chosen." His smile was razor sharp. "They gave you up so easily. Did you know your father didn't even negotiate? Just handed you over like spoiled meat." The words hit like fists because they were true. "So here's how this works," the king continued, circling her slowly like a predator. "You saved my life. I don't tolerate debts, which means you'll stay here in my fortress until I decide how to repay you. You'll have a room, food, freedom to move about the grounds. But you don't leave Wolfhaven. You don't contact your family. And you absolutely don't speak of what happened in that forest to anyone." He stopped in front of her again. "Are we clear?" "I'm a prisoner," Diana said flatly. "You're a guest." His eyes glittered. "Who happens to be unable to leave." "What's the difference?" He leaned in close enough that she could see flecks of amber in that impossible gold. "Prisoners get cells. You get a tower room with a view. Don't confuse kindness for weakness, little human." Diana should have been afraid, should have bowed her head and accepted her fate. Instead, she heard herself say, "And if I refuse?" The silence that followed was absolute. Then the Alpha King threw back his head and laughed, a sound so unexpected, so genuine, that it transformed his face completely. For just a moment, he didn't look like a king at all. He looked young, surprised, almost delighted. Almost? "Oh," he said, still smiling. "I think I'm going to enjoy this." He gestured to someone Diana couldn't see. 2 guards materialized from the shadows. "Take her to the North Tower, the Blue Room. Make sure she has everything she needs." He looked at Diana one last time, and that smile turned sharp again. "Welcome to Wolfhaven, Diana Harper. Try not to die of boredom before I figure out what to do with you." Then he turned and walked away, dismissing her as easily as he'd summoned her. The guards led Diana from the throne room, through more corridors, up a winding staircase that seemed to climb forever. Her mind reeled. The Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in the territories, had just laughed at her defiance. She didn't know if that made her lucky or doomed. The North Tower room was beautiful in a cold, untouchable way. High ceilings, stone walls softened by tapestries, a massive bed with blue silk sheets, a window that looked out over the city all the way to the mountains beyond. and on the bedside table, a single white card with a message written in elegant script. "Dinner will be brought to your room. Rest. We'll speak again tomorrow." M. Diana sank onto the bed, her legs finally giving out. She'd freed a wolf from chains, and now she was the one who'd been caged. But as she looked at her bandaged hands, hands that had touched silver and burned, she couldn't quite bring herself to regret it. Not yet. She didn't sleep that first night. How could she? Every sound in the tower was amplified, the wind against stone, footsteps in distant corridors, the occasional howl from somewhere in the city below. Diana lay in the silk sheets, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the throne room scene over and over. Those gold eyes, that laugh. I think I'm going to enjoy this. What did that mean? What did he want from her? Dinner had come as promised, brought by a young servant girl who wouldn't meet Diana's eyes. Roasted venison, fresh bread, wine so rich it tasted like cherries and smoke. She'd eaten mechanically, tasting nothing. Now the empty dishes sat on a table by the window, like evidence of a crime she couldn't name. The clock on the mantel showed half midnight when she heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. Diana sat up, her heart suddenly hammering. The footsteps stopped outside her door. A pause long enough that she thought maybe she'd imagined it. Then 3 deliberate knocks. "I know you're awake," came his voice through the wood. The king's voice, but softer than before. Almost tired. "May I come in?" Diana should have said no, should have demanded he leave her alone, told him that midnight visits to a woman's room were inappropriate at best and threatening at worst. Instead, she heard herself say, "It's your fortress." The door opened. Magnus Silverstone stepped inside, and Diana realized immediately that something was different. He'd changed from his formal leathers into simple dark clothes, a loose shirt, worn trousers, boots unlaced. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes looked haunted. He closed the door behind him, but didn't move further into the room. Just stood there, backlit by the corridor torches, studying her with an intensity that made Diana's skin prickle. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair point." He moved then, crossing to the window, carefully keeping distance between them. He looked out over the city, his shoulders tense. "I owe you an apology for earlier, in the throne room. I was cruel." Diana blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. "You were stating facts, cruel facts." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, he looked younger, more human. "Your father didn't fight for you. Your pack watched you taken without protest. Those things are true, but I didn't need to say them, not like that." "Why did you?" He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Because I needed to see if you'd break." The honesty of it stole Diana's breath. "And you didn't." He crossed his arms, something like admiration flickering across his face. "You stood there and took every word. Then you asked me what difference there was between prisoner and guest. Do you know how long it's been since anyone questioned me? Maybe if you weren't so terrifying, people would do it more often." The words were out before Diana could stop them. She tensed, waiting for anger. Instead, he laughed, that same genuine sound from the throne room, rich and unexpected. There it is again, that spine of steel wrapped in silk. He shook his head, moving to the chair by the fireplace and dropping into it like his strings had been cut. "Everyone else treats me like a monster. You treat me like a man who happens to be inconvenient." "Aren't you? A man or inconvenient?" "Both." He studied her for a long moment, something complicated working behind his eyes. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and Diana saw the exhaustion, the weight. "I didn't ask for you to free me," he said quietly. "I want you to understand that. I was ready to die in those chains, had accepted it. Then you appeared out of nowhere, this human girl with impossible courage, and you burned yourself saving a wolf you didn't know." His jaw tightened. "Why? And don't give me that line about mercy. There's a reason. Tell me the real reason." Diana pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The truth felt dangerous. But something about the darkness, the hour, the way he was looking at her like she mattered, loosened her tongue. "Because I understood," she said quietly, "what it feels like to be trapped, to be punished for something you can't control, to have everyone tell you that your wants, your choices, your voice don't matter because you're not enough." She met his eyes. "You were chained for refusing a bond you didn't want. I've been invisible my whole life for being born human. Different prisons, maybe, but we both know what it's like to be told we're wrong for existing as we are." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Magnus rose and crossed to the bed, not fast, giving her time to object. He sat on the edge, close enough that Diana could feel the heat of him, but not touching, just present. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. "Your real name, not your title." His eyebrows rose. "You don't know?" "They only ever called you the Alpha King or His Majesty, like you're a position, not a person." Something raw crossed his face. "Magnus," he said softly. "Magnus Silverstone. Silverstone." She turned it over in her mind. It suited him. All silver and stone, beautiful and unyielding. "Magnus, why did you really refuse the bond? The mate the goddess supposedly chose for you?" His hands curled into fists on his thighs. "Because she didn't choose her. Victor did." His voice turned bitter. "Victor wanted a political alliance with the Eastern Territories, and Princess Aurora was the key. So he arranged the entire thing, bribed the Moon Priestess, staged a divine vision, presented it as the goddess's will. Everyone believed it. My entire council, the Pax, even Aurora herself believed it. But I knew. I've known Victor since we were children. I know when he's manipulating." "So you refused?" "So I refused. And Victor invoked the ancient law. Any king who defies the goddess's will must prove his worthiness through suffering." He looked at his hands. 3 weeks in silver chains, alone in the forest. If I truly was worthy, the goddess would send someone to free me. If not, I'd die, and Victor would take the throne. Diana's stomach dropped. It was a test you were supposed to fail. Victor chose that forest deliberately, remote, far from any pack routes. No one goes there. No one should have found me. He turned to look at her, and those gold eyes burned. "But you did." "I was gathering nightshade," Diana whispered. "I go to that ridge every week. It was chance." "Was it?" His hand moved slowly, carefully, and touched the edge of her bandaged palm. "The goddess works through chance, through mercy, through burned hands that smell like silver and sacrifice." His voice dropped. "Do you know what the law says happens if someone passes the test? If someone frees the king?" Diana shook her head. "The person who frees him is marked by fate. They become significant. Whether as ally, enemy, or something else, the choice is mine. But you can't be dismissed. You can't be ignored." His thumb traced the edge of the bandage. "You saved my life, Diana Harper. And in doing so, you've changed everything." "I don't want to change anything," she said, hating how her voice shook. "What do you want?" "To matter, to be seen, to not be invisible anymore." But she couldn't say that. It felt too raw, too honest for someone she'd met hours ago. "I want to understand," she said instead. "Why keep me here? If I'm significant, shouldn't you want me far away where I can't cause problems?" Magnus's laugh was soft, almost sad. "You think you'd cause me problems?" "I think I already have. I freed you from chains your own beta put you in. I proved his test was false, that the goddess's will isn't what he claimed." She met his eyes squarely. "And now you're keeping me here, in your fortress, where I'm a visible reminder of his failure." "Yes." And his expression hardened. "Victor wanted me dead or broken. Instead, I returned with you, living proof that his scheme failed. Now the entire court is buzzing with questions. The Pax are whispering. And Victor—" He smiled, sharp as a knife. "Victor is terrified." "Good," Diana said, before she could stop herself. He turned, surprise clear on his face. Good? Anyone who chains someone they claim to serve deserves to be terrified. For a heartbeat, Magnus just stared at her. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before the bed, bringing them eye to eye. His hands framed her knees, not holding, just there, grounding. I need to ask you something, he said, and his voice was different now, vulnerable. And I need you to answer honestly. All right. Are you afraid of me? Diana should have said yes, should have recognized the danger in those gold eyes, in the way power radiated from him like heat. But when she looked at him, really looked, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man who'd been betrayed by someone he trusted, a king who'd been willing to die rather than be controlled, a wolf who'd protected a stranger before running to freedom. No, she said quietly, I'm afraid of what you represent. This world, these laws, this power structure that treats people like commodities. But you, the person behind the crown? She shook her head. You scare me less than my own father did. Something broke in his expression. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were suspiciously bright. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For seeing me. The words hung between them, fragile and profound. Diana understood then what he'd meant earlier. Everyone treated him like a monster or a king. No one treated him like Magnus, just a man trying to survive in a world that demanded he be something more. He stood abruptly, the moment shattering. I should go. You need rest. You need... Magnus? He paused at the door, hand on the frame. Why did you really come here tonight? He was quiet for so long, Diana thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you're the first person in years who's looked at me without calculation, without want. You freed me, expecting nothing in return. He exhaled roughly. I needed to know if that was real, and it terrifies me how much I hope it is. He pulled the door open. Sleep, Diana. Tomorrow I'll show you the fortress, introduce you to the court. Let them all see that you're under my protection. Protection from what? His smile was grim. From people like Victor, who'd love nothing more than to eliminate the evidence of his failure. From wolves who think humans are prey. From a world that will see you as my weakness and test you accordingly. He met her eyes one last time. Welcome to the game, little human. I hope you're better at it than you think. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click. Diana sat in the darkness, her heart racing, her mind spinning. Magnus Silverstone, the Alpha King who laughed at her defiance and apologized for his cruelty, who knelt at her feet asking if she was afraid, who saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one in her pack ever had. She touched her bandaged hands, remembering the burn of silver, the weight of chains, the gold eye watching her from the forest floor. She'd freed a wolf, and in doing so, had bound herself to him in ways she didn't fully understand yet. But as she finally lay back down, exhaustion pulling at her like tide, Diana realized something that should have terrified her. She didn't want to be freed. Not from this, not from him, not yet. The next morning came too soon. Sunlight streaming through the window, a servant knocking softly to bring breakfast and draw a bath. This time it was a different girl, older than the one from last night, with shrewd eyes that assessed Diana quickly. His Majesty requests your presence in the library after you've eaten, she said, setting the tray down. Dress is being provided. She gestured to a wardrobe Diana hadn't noticed, something more practical than last night's gown. Inside the wardrobe hung several outfits, simple but well-made tunics and trousers, dresses in sturdy fabrics, even boots that looked like they might actually fit, all in shades of blue and gray and green, nothing ostentatious, clothes for living, not just being looked at. Diana chose dark trousers and a soft gray tunic, braided her hair back, and tried not to think about how her hands shook as she wrapped the fresh bandages the servant had provided. The burns were healing faster than they should have. The salve must have had shifter medicine in it. The library, when she found it after only 2 wrong turns and 1 helpful guard, stole whatever composure she'd built. It was enormous. 3 stories of books reaching toward a vaulted glass ceiling, with spiral staircases connecting the levels and reading nooks tucked into alcoves. Morning light poured through the glass, illuminating thousands of spines in every color imaginable. The smell of old paper and leather and possibility wrapped around Diana like a blanket. "I'd died and gone to heaven," she thought. "I thought you might like it," came Magnus's voice from somewhere above. Diana looked up to see him on the 2nd level, leaning against the railing, and her breath caught. He was dressed formally again, black and silver, every inch the king, but his expression was soft, almost pleased. "Like it?" she breathed. "I want to live here." "Consider it done." He descended the stairs with fluid grace. "This library is yours to use as you wish. Read anything. Take books to your room. Stay all day if you want. I only ask that you don't remove anything from the restricted section," he gestured to a locked door in the back, "and that you tell me if you find anything particularly interesting." "Why?" The question slipped out before Diana could catch it. "Why give me access to your library? To knowledge? Isn't that dangerous?" Magnus tilted his head, studying her. "Knowledge is only dangerous to those who fear informed people. I don't fear you, Diana. I'm intrigued by you." He moved closer. "Besides, I suspect you'll find things in these books that I've overlooked. Fresh eyes, different perspective. Consider it a trade. You get books, I get your insights." It felt like a trap, but it also felt like respect, the kind she'd never been offered before. "What's the real reason?" she asked quietly. His smile turned sad. "Because you said you understood what it feels like to be trapped." "Well, these books," he gestured at the walls of knowledge, "were my escape when I was growing up as the heir to a throne I didn't want. My father was cruel. My mother died when I was young. The books were the only place I could be free." He met her eyes. "I thought you might need an escape, too." The gesture was so unexpectedly kind that Diana didn't know how to respond. So she said the only truth she had. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met the court." But she would meet them soon. And among them would be Victor Bloodclaw, the man who'd chained a king, who'd arranged a false divine mandate, who'd tried to seize a throne through manipulation and torture. The man who now had to face the living proof of his failure, a human girl with silver-scarred hands and eyes that saw too much. Diana wasn't naive. She understood the danger, understood that Magnus had just placed her in the center of a game where the stakes were life and death, power and freedom. Understood that by freeing him, she'd made herself a target. But as she stood in that library surrounded by knowledge and possibility, with Magnus watching her like she was something precious rather than something broken, Diana felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The library became Diana's sanctuary. Each morning she woke to find a small breakfast tray outside her door with a note in elegant handwriting. "The library awaits. M." Each morning she would dress in the practical clothes provided, wrap her healing hands, and lose herself among endless rows of books. History, philosophy, poetry, maps of territories she'd never visit, treaties written in languages she was slowly teaching herself. The collection was staggering, and she devoured it like a starving thing. But it wasn't just the books that kept her coming back. It was him. Magnus appeared in the library every afternoon without fail, usually around the 3rd bell. Sometimes he brought work scrolls to review, documents to sign, and he'd settle into one of the reading nooks while Diana explored. Other times, he'd find her curled in a window seat and simply talk about books, about history, about nothing and everything. It was during one of these conversations, 2 weeks into her stay, that Diana first glimpsed the true nature of the court she'd entered. She was reading a collection of old fables when Magnus dropped into the chair across from her, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "Rough day?" she asked, setting the book aside. "Victor is pushing for a vote of no confidence in my leadership," Magnus said, rubbing his face. "Says my erratic behavior following the chains incident proves I'm unfit to rule." He laughed bitterly. "He's gathering support among the older council members, the ones who still believe kings should be controlled by tradition and law, not personal choice. What will you do?" "Outmaneuver him, prove my decisions are sound, win back the loyalty he's been systematically eroding." He looked at her, vulnerability plain in his expression. "But I'm tired, Diana. So tired of the games, the politics, the constant need to prove I'm worthy of a crown I never wanted." Diana understood that exhaustion, had lived it differently, but the weight was familiar. The constant need to prove she deserved to exist in a pack that saw her as defective. "Want to hear a riddle?" she asked suddenly. Magnus blinked in surprise. "A riddle?" "My mother used to tell them to me when I was young," Diana said softly, "before she stopped looking at me, before my humanity became a source of shame instead of just a fact. They were my favorite thing, not because of the answers, but because they made you think differently, see things from unexpected angles." Magnus leaned forward, interest lighting his eyes. "Tell me." Diana thought for a moment, pulling from memory a riddle her mother had particularly loved. "What is stronger than steel, yet cannot be seen? What binds tighter than chains, but leaves no marks? What can outlast kingdoms, yet breaks with a single word?" Magnus considered, his brow furrowing in concentration. Diana watched the way his mind worked, saw him turning the words over, testing possibilities. It was fascinating, seeing the king disappear and just the man remain. "Something intangible," he murmured. "Stronger than steel. Loyalty? No, loyalty can be seen in actions." He looked up. "Trust? Close, but trust can be rebuilt after it breaks." He stood, pacing, and Diana realized he'd completely forgotten his exhaustion. "Binds tighter than chains. Outlasts kingdoms." He stopped suddenly. "A promise? The answer is a promise." Diana smiled. "Very good. But that was too easy." "Was it?" Diana stood, crossing to where he waited. "Think about it, Magnus. What is a promise, really? It's words, air, nothing physical. Yet a promise can start wars or end them, can build kingdoms or destroy them. A promise kept is stronger than any chain." Her voice softened. "A promise broken can shatter a person more thoroughly than any weapon." The air between them shifted, grew heavier. "You're not talking about riddles anymore," Magnus said quietly. "Aren't I?" Diana held his gaze. "Victor promised to serve you. Your father promised to protect you. My family promised to value me despite my humanity. Promises, Magnus, bind us more than any law or chain or title." "And what promises have you made?" His voice was soft, but there was something intense behind it, like her answer mattered more than it should. "Only one that I kept," Diana said softly. "That I'd never become so invisible that I disappeared entirely, that I'd matter, even if only to myself. You matter to more than just yourself now." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning Diana wasn't quite ready to examine. She stepped back, breaking the moment, and returned to her chair. "Your turn," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "You must know riddles, royal education and all that." Magnus's smile was slow, almost predatory. "Oh, I know riddles, but mine aren't as kind as yours." He settled back into his chair, legs stretched out, completely at ease now. "Here's one. What runs but never walks? Has a mouth but never talks? Has a bed but never sleeps? Has a head but never weeps?" "A river," Diana said immediately. His eyebrows rose. "That was too easy." "You gave me a children's riddle." She threw his words back at him with a grin. He laughed, that genuine, transformative sound that made him look years younger. "All right, clever human, let's make this interesting. We trade riddles, but not the easy ones. Real riddles, the kind that make you think for days. What are the stakes?" "Stakes?" He tilted his head. "What do you want if you win?" Diana thought about it. What did she want? "Answers. If I stump you, you answer one question. Truthfully, no political deflection. And if I stump you same, one honest answer." He extended his hand. "Deal." They shook on it, and Diana felt the weight of the promise settle between them. Another invisible chain, but this one felt safe, chosen. Over the following days, the riddle game became their ritual. They'd meet in the library, work or read in comfortable silence, and then, without warning, one of them would pose a riddle. Sometimes they'd answer immediately. Other times, they'd puzzle over them for hours, debating interpretations and possibilities. Magnus stumped her with, "I am not alive, but I grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air. I don't have a mouth, but water kills me. What am I?" Diana spent 2 days on that one before finally conceding. Fire. His grin had been infuriatingly smug. "My question. Why did you really come to the forest that day? And don't say nightshade berries. You could have gathered those anywhere." Diana had hesitated, then told him the truth she hadn't admitted to anyone. "Because it was the one place I felt like I could breathe. Where no one was watching me, judging me, finding me lacking. I went there to feel less trapped." His expression had softened. "And instead you found a literally trapped wolf. The irony." The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Diana stumped him with, "What can bring back the dead, make you cry, make you laugh, make you young, is born in an instant yet lasts a lifetime." He'd wrestled with that one for 3 days before finally giving up. "I don't know." "A memory." He'd gone very still. Then, "My question. What's the worst thing anyone's ever said to you?" Diana had expected him to ask something about Victor, about the court, about political things, not this. "My father," she'd said quietly after a long pause. "When I failed to shift for the 3rd time, I was 16. He looked at me and said, 'I'd rather have no daughter than a broken one.'" She'd met Magnus's eyes. "That's when I became invisible. When I realized I'd never be enough, no matter what I did." Magnus had stood, crossed to where she sat, and done something unexpected. He'd taken her hand, her scarred, silver-burned hand, and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. "You are not broken," he'd said with absolute conviction. "You are not invisible, and anyone who made you feel that way is the broken one, not you." Diana had pulled her hand back, overwhelmed by the intensity of his touch, his words, his eyes. "Your turn to ask a riddle." He'd let her deflect, but something had shifted between them in that moment. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. It was in the library, 3 weeks into Diana's stay, that she discovered the truth Victor had tried to bury. Master Grimwald, the elderly keeper of the library, had taken a liking to Diana. He was a stooped, white-haired wolf with kind eyes and a sharp mind who appreciated her genuine love of books. "There's a section of journals you might find interesting," he told her one morning when Magnus was occupied with council matters. "Personal accounts from past advisors to the throne, historical perspectives that aren't in the official records." The journals were dusty, forgotten things shelved in a quiet corner. Diana selected one at random, a leather-bound volume marked only with the date from 20 years ago. The handwriting inside was cramped but legible, the observations of a man named Thorne who had served as chief advisor to Magnus's father. Diana was skimming the entries when a name caught her eye. Victor Bloodclaw. "The young Bloodclaw shows disturbing tendencies," the entry read. "His loyalty to the crown is unquestionable, but his methods are concerning. Today I discovered he had arranged for a rival pack's territory to be raided, making it appear as the work of human poachers. When confronted, he showed no remorse, claiming it was necessary to prevent them aligning with the Western territories. The prince, Magnus, suspects nothing, trusting his childhood friend implicitly. I fear what Victor might do when Magnus eventually takes the throne. His view of power is distorted by his wartime experiences, his hatred of humans pathological after the loss of his family." Diana's hands trembled as she turned the pages, finding more entries that documented Victor's manipulations. The final entry, dated shortly before the advisor's mysterious death from natural causes, was the most damning. Victor has made contact with the Eastern Moon Priestess. I believe he intends to fabricate a divine mandate regarding the princess. His obsession with bloodline purity has only grown stronger, as has his conviction that humans represent an existential threat to wolfkind. He sees Magnus's more moderate views as weakness. I've gathered evidence of his schemes, which I will present to the king tomorrow. May the moon goddess protect us all if I'm too late. The next page was blank. Thorne had never made his presentation, and 15 years later, Victor had arranged for the false mate bond with Princess Aurora, setting in motion the events that would lead to silver chains in a forest clearing. Diana closed the journal, her mind racing. This wasn't just about a throne. This was about two fundamentally different visions for the future. Magnus, who believed in choice and questioned tradition. Victor, scarred by war and loss, who believed survival depended on purity and strength. She needed to show this to Magnus. But when she turned, Victor Bloodclaw himself stood in the doorway, watching her with those ice-blue eyes. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice smooth as silk over steel. "How fascinating to find you here, in the private archives." Diana clutched the journal tightly. "Master Grimwald suggested some historical reading." "Did he?" Victor stepped into the room, his movements fluid, predatory. "And what history has captured your interest today?" "Court politics," Diana said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "The shifting alliances of the previous reign." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Politics and power, heavy subjects for a human to comprehend." He moved closer. "You've caused quite a stir in Wolfhaven. The human girl who freed the king. Some call it destiny. Others call it suspiciously convenient." "I was gathering herbs," Diana said flatly. "So you've said." Victor stood directly before her now, close enough that Diana could smell him. Not cedar and smoke like Magnus, but frost and metal. Yet here you are, living in the royal wing, spending your days in his private library, whispering in his ear. His voice hardened. "What game are you playing, human?" "No game," Diana said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Magnus offered me sanctuary until my debt is repaid. I accepted." "Magnus," Victor repeated, his eyes narrowing at her use of the king's name. "How familiar you've become. How intimate." Diana said nothing, just held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Let me tell you something about our king," Victor continued, circling her now. "He is brilliant but flawed, compassionate to a fault. It makes him vulnerable to manipulation, especially from those who appear helpless." He paused behind her, his voice dropping to a whisper near her ear, like little human girls with sad eyes and burned hands. Diana turned to face him, anger overcoming fear. "Is that how you've controlled him all these years, pretending to protect him while manipulating him?" A flash of genuine surprise crossed Victor's face, quickly masked. "You presume much for someone who's been here less than a month." "I see clearly for someone who's been invisible her whole life," Diana countered. Victor studied her for a long moment, reassessment in his cold eyes. "Perhaps you do, which makes you more dangerous than I initially believed." He stepped back. "A word of caution, Miss Harper. Kings may indulge in temporary fascinations, but they marry for alliance and breed for strength. Whatever attention Magnus shows you is fleeting. When it ends, you'll find yourself very alone in a court that sees you as prey." "Is that a threat?" "An observation." Victor smiled thinly. "Wolves mate for life, but they play with many toys before finding their true match." Before Diana could respond, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Magnus appeared in the doorway, his expression darkening when he saw them. "Victor," he said, voice carefully neutral, "I didn't realize you had an interest in the archives." "Academic curiosity," Victor replied smoothly. "Miss Harper and I were discussing court history." "Were you?" Not a question. The tension between them crackled in the air. Two alphas, both powerful, both dangerous in their own ways. "The council is waiting," Magnus said finally. We're discussing the Northern Territory trade agreements. Of course, Your Majesty. Victor bowed slightly, then looked at Diana one last time. Do continue your studies, Miss Harper. History has much to teach us about the dangers of forgetting our nature. He left, brushing past Magnus with calculated casualness. When his footsteps faded, Magnus crossed to Diana, concern evident in his face. Are you all right? What did he say to you? Diana hesitated, then offered the journal. I found something you should see. Magnus read the relevant entries, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he closed the journal with careful restraint that barely contained his fury. Thorne died the day after writing this, he said quietly. I always suspected, but could never prove. He looked at Diana. Victor must have seen you reading this. Yes, Diana confirmed. He made it clear he sees me as a threat. You are, Magnus said simply, not just because you freed me, but because you see him clearly. His jaw tightened. He's been my shadow since childhood, my closest advisor and friend, I thought. The one person I trusted absolutely. Pain flashed in his eyes. And all this time, he's been manipulating events, orchestrating his own vision of what the kingdom should be. He genuinely believes he's protecting you, Diana said softly. Protecting all wolves. That's what makes him dangerous. He's not acting from simple ambition, but from conviction. Magnus looked at her with surprise. Most would simply call him evil. Evil is simple, Diana replied. Victor is complex. He lost everything to human hunters during the territory wars. He watched his mate and cubs die. That kind of pain transforms. It becomes purpose. You defend him? I understand him, Diana corrected, which is different from excusing him. Understanding your enemy gives you power over them. Magnus studied her with new appreciation. You would have made an exceptional royal advisor. In another life, perhaps. Diana smiled sadly. Where I was born a wolf, not a human aberration. No, Magnus shook his head. In this life, as exactly what you are. He took the journal from her. I need to secure this somewhere safe. It's evidence, but not enough on its own. We need more. We? Yes, we. Magnus's eyes held hers. Victor threatened you today. That makes this your fight too, whether you wanted it or not. Diana thought of Victor's words. Kings may indulge in temporary fascinations. What exactly am I to you, Magnus? A curiosity? A debt to be repaid? A useful ally against Victor? The question hung between them, dangerous in its directness. Magnus was silent for a long moment, then moved to close the archive door, ensuring their privacy. When he turned back, the king was gone, leaving just the man. You are impossible, he said finally, his voice low and intimate. You are the human who saved a wolf king, the invisible girl who sees everything, the one person in this fortress who looks at me and sees Magnus, not just a crown. He stepped closer. You are the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me, and still not close enough. Diana's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm falling in love with you. The words fell between them, heavy with implication. Against all logic, against all duty, against every political instinct I possess. Magnus ran a hand through his hair, agitated. I should be focused on countering Victor, on securing alliances, on running my kingdom. Instead, I find myself counting the minutes until I can see you, bringing you books just to watch your face light up, thinking of you when I should be thinking of statecraft. You can't, Diana whispered, though her heart raced traitorously. I'm human. You're the Alpha King. It's impossible. So was finding you in that forest, Magnus countered. So was you freeing me from those chains. So was everything that's happened since. He took her scarred hand gently. I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, being what others needed, following the path laid out for me. And it made me hollow, Diana. It made me into someone I didn't recognize. His thumb traced the silver scars on her palm. Then you appeared, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Like Magnus, not just the king, like a person who mattered beyond his crown. That's not love, Diana said, though she didn't pull her hand away. "That's escape." "It's both," Magnus smiled sadly. "You're my escape and my reality, my weakness and my strength, my impossible choice that somehow feels like the only choice that matters." Diana felt tears burn her eyes. "This won't work. The court, your people, Victor, they'll destroy us." "Let them try." Magnus's forehead pressed to hers, an intimate gesture that felt more revealing than a kiss. "But Diana, I need you to tell me, what do you want? If nothing else mattered, no politics, no practicality, no fear, what would you choose?" And there it was, the question that unraveled her, because the answer was simple and terrifying and true. "You," Diana whispered. "I'd choose you." His breath caught. "Say it again." "I'd choose you, Magnus, even though it's impossible, even though it's dangerous, even though I should run as far and fast as I can." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I'd choose you. Every time." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Magnus's hand slid into her hair, cradling her head, and he looked at her like she'd just given him something infinitely precious. "Then stay," he said. "Stay and let me figure out how to make this work. Stay and be impossible with me. Stay." The door burst open. A guard stood there, breathing hard, face pale. "Your Majesty, there's been an incident. Princess Aurora, the Eastern Pact princess, she's been attacked." He swallowed hard. "They're calling it an assassination attempt, and they're saying it was ordered by you." The world stopped. Magnus went very still. "What?" "The Eastern territories are mobilizing," the guard continued, the words tumbling out. "They're demanding you present yourself for trial. They're saying you tried to kill the princess to prevent the alliance from being revived." The guard's eyes flicked to Diana. "And they're saying your attachment to the human is proof you've lost your mind." Victor's final move. Of course, if he couldn't take the throne through a vote, he'd take it through war. Magnus's hand fell away from Diana, the king replacing the man in seconds. His shoulders straightened, expression hardening, the weight of the crown settling back into place. "Summon the council. Send ambassadors to the Eastern territories. Find everyone who can confirm Princess Aurora and I had an amicable parting, and discover who actually ordered the attack." His voice was steel. "Someone's trying to start a war. I want to know who." The guard nodded and fled. Magnus turned to Diana, and the anguish in his eyes broke her heart. "I have to go. Have to deal with this. Have to prove I'm not insane or a would-be murderer." He cupped her face one last time. "Stay here in the archives. Don't go anywhere. Victor will use this chaos to make a move against you, I know it. Just stay. Please." "Magnus." She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "I love you." "I meant it," he said urgently. "I meant every word. Whatever happens next, I meant it." Then he was gone, leaving Diana alone in the archives with crumbling journals and the echo of a confession that had just made everything infinitely more complicated. She didn't stay in the archives, not because she was defiant, but because she understood the game better than Magnus realized. If Victor was behind the attack on Princess Aurora, then he'd expect Magnus to hide Diana away. He'd have people watching the archives, the library, her tower room. The safest place was somewhere no one would think to look. So Diana slipped out a servant's passage Master Grimwald had shown her, made her way through the lower levels of the fortress, and found herself in the one place she was certain Victor wouldn't search: the Moon Temple. The temple was a small circular room deep within the fortress walls. Silver light filtered through crystal windows, illuminating an altar carved from white stone. No one was present this time of day, the priestesses occupied with evening prayers elsewhere. Diana settled in an alcove hidden by heavy curtains, drawing her knees to her chest. From here, she could hear anyone approaching long before they saw her. She wasn't sure how long she needed to hide, only that she needed to stay out of Victor's reach until Magnus resolved the crisis. Hours passed. The temple remained empty. Diana's thoughts circled like caged birds. Magnus loved her, had said it plainly. And she loved him, this wolf king who saw her when no one else did. But love wasn't enough. Not against politics, not against tradition, not against Victor's carefully orchestrated chaos. The attack on Princess Aurora was brilliant in its simplicity. It created an immediate crisis that demanded Magnus's full attention, separated him from Diana, and provided the perfect opportunity for Victor to eliminate the evidence of his failure. Diana had no illusions about what would happen if Victor found her now, with Magnus occupied elsewhere. She would disappear, another mysterious death blamed on natural causes. The question was how long she needed to hide, how long before Magnus secured the situation enough to protect her again. She got her answer near midnight, when 2 temple attendants entered, speaking in hushed voices. "The Eastern emissaries arrived an hour ago," one said. "They're demanding the king's presence in the East for trial." "Will he go?" the second asked. "What choice does he have? They're threatening war, 3 territories against 1. It was Victor who convinced them, you know. He presented evidence of the king's instability, letters, witness accounts, the human girl. You believe he's behind it?" "I believe Victor has waited 15 years to take that throne. The king's refusal of Princess Aurora was the opportunity he needed." Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the temple. Diana sat frozen, mind racing. If Magnus was forced to travel east for trial, he would be vulnerable, away from his power base, surrounded by hostile wolves. It was a death sentence disguised as justice. She had to warn him, had to tell him this was exactly what Victor wanted. Diana was about to leave her hiding place when the temple doors opened again. This time, it was Commander Freya who entered, accompanied by 2 guards. "Search every alcove," she ordered. "The human can't have gone far." Diana pressed back against the wall, heart pounding. Freya was loyal to Magnus, wasn't she? But in her current panic, Diana couldn't be certain who to trust. The curtain to her alcove was yanked aside. Diana found herself staring up at Commander Freya, whose ice-blue eyes betrayed nothing. "Found you," Freya said flatly. Diana rose, chin lifted. "I need to see Magnus. The king is in emergency council. The situation with the Eastern territories is critical." Freya stepped aside, gesturing to her guards. "You're coming with me." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." Something about her tone set off alarms. "Safe where?" "Please, Miss Harper, this will be easier if you cooperate." Diana stood her ground. "I want to see Magnus. I want to hear from him directly." Freya's jaw tightened. "That's not possible right now." "Why not?" "Because seeing you is exactly what Victor wants," Freya said sharply. "He's arguing to the council that the king's judgment is compromised, that his attachment to you is clouding his decisions, making him vulnerable to manipulation." She met Diana's eyes directly. "Every moment the king spends with you right now is ammunition for Victor's case. Surely you see that." Diana did see it, hated it, but saw it. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, defeated. "Somewhere away from court, away from the politics and the danger." Freya's expression softened slightly. "The king wants you protected, Diana. This is how he's chosen to do it." Diana followed her through corridors that seemed darker than before, down staircases that descended into parts of the fortress she'd never seen. They emerged in a courtyard where a carriage waited, simple, unmarked, with 2 guards she didn't recognize. "Get in," Freya said. "Not until you tell me where we're going." Freya sighed. "To a villa on the western border. Remote, comfortable, safe. You'll have everything you need. Books, supplies, servants. But you'll be away from Wolfhaven, away from the court." She paused. "Away from him." "You're exiling me." The word tasted like ashes. "The king is protecting you. By sending me away without even saying goodbye." Freya's expression cracked slightly. "He wanted to come himself, argued for an hour to see you one more time, but Victor convinced the council it would be seen as the king prioritizing a human over kingdom security, that it would be proof his judgment was compromised." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "He's fighting for you, Diana, but he's also fighting for his throne, for peace with the Eastern territories, for the stability of the entire kingdom. Right now, the best way he can fight for you is to let you go." The logic was sound. Diana understood it, even as it broke something inside her. Did he send a message? Her voice was smaller than she wanted. Freya reached into her coat and pulled out a sealed letter. The wax bore Magnus's personal mark, a wolf and thorn intertwined. He said you'd understand. Diana took the letter with shaking hands but didn't open it. Couldn't, not yet. How long? She asked. I don't know, Freya admitted. Weeks, maybe months. However long it takes to resolve the Eastern Territory situation and prove Victor's accusations false. She gestured to the carriage. Please, Diana, this is hard enough without making it harder. Diana climbed into the carriage because what other choice did she have? Fight? Run? Stay and watch Magnus lose everything trying to defend her? As the carriage lurched forward, carrying her away from Wolfhaven, away from Magnus, she finally opened the letter. His handwriting was rushed, slightly uneven, written in haste and emotion. Diana, I'm sorry. Those are the first words because they're the truest ones. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye. Sorry I couldn't fight harder to keep you here. Sorry I'm sending you away after just confessing that I love you, but I meant what I said, every word. And because I love you, I need you safe. Victor is making moves, using the Eastern Territory crisis to consolidate power, to paint me as unfit, to position himself for another attempt at the throne. If you stay, you become his primary target. He'll hurt you to hurt me, and I can't. I won't let that happen. The villa where Freya is taking you is comfortable, isolated. You'll have books, supplies, everything you need. Think of it as your own library, but bigger, quieter, safer. I know this feels like abandonment, like I'm choosing the kingdom over you, but I'm trying to choose both, trying to find a way to keep my throne and keep you. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know how long this will take. The Eastern Territories want blood or proof of innocence. Victor is blocking every investigation. The council is divided, but I will fix this. I will find whoever attacked Princess Aurora. I will prove Victor's involvement. And when I do, when the dust settles and the kingdom is stable, I'm coming for you. Wait for me, Diana. Please wait for me to be the kind of king who deserves you, the kind of man who can give you the choice without consequences. Until then, I'm asking you to do the hardest thing. Trust that this separation is temporary, that I meant what I said, that you're not invisible to me, and you never will be. I love you. That's the one thing that doesn't change, no matter what happens next. Yours, M.P.S. There's a riddle in this letter. See if you can find it before I see you again. Diana read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked for the riddle. It wasn't in the words themselves. It was in the structure, the way certain phrases were emphasized, the way he'd signed it yours when he was a king who belonged to no one. The riddle was simple and devastating. What holds you closer by letting go? Love. Real love. The kind that prioritizes the other person's safety over your own desire to keep them close. Diana folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest as the carriage carried her away from everything she'd found in Wolfhaven. Away from the library and the riddles and the midnight conversations. Away from Magnus. The villa was exactly as Freya had described. Comfortable, isolated, and utterly lonely. It sat in a valley surrounded by pine forests, with a small stream running through the property. The building itself was beautiful, stone and timber, with large windows that let in floods of natural light. Diana's room was spacious, filled with books that had clearly been selected by someone who knew her taste. Magnus. He'd prepared this place for her, even as he was sending her away. The servants were kind but distant, giving her space. There was a library, smaller than Wolfhaven's but still impressive. A garden where she could walk. Everything she'd ever dreamed of back in Ravenscroft when she was invisible and forgotten. But none of it mattered because she was alone, and the one person she wanted to share it with was fighting a political war she couldn't help him with. Days blurred into weeks. Diana read voraciously, trying to lose herself in stories. She walked the forest paths, gathering herbs out of habit. She wrote letters to Magnus that she couldn't send because she didn't know if they'd be intercepted, used as evidence against him. At night, she'd lie in the beautiful bed and remember the weight of his hand on hers, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the gold of his eyes in candlelight. "Wait for me," he'd written. "I'm coming for you." So Diana waited. 6 weeks into her exile, a messenger arrived with news. Princess Aurora had recovered from her injuries. The investigation had revealed the attack was orchestrated by a faction within the Eastern Territories who opposed any alliance with Magnus, wolves who had hoped the princess's mate bond would give them influence. The attack was meant to look like Magnus's work, to start a war that would weaken both kingdoms. Magnus had been exonerated publicly. The Eastern Territories had sent formal apologies. Diana waited for him to come, packed her things, stood at the window watching the road. He didn't come. Instead, another letter arrived. Not in his handwriting, but in an elegant script Diana didn't recognize. "Miss Harper, I write to inform you that while His Majesty has been cleared of wrongdoing in the matter of Princess Aurora's attack, the political situation remains complex. The Council has advised that your return to Wolfhaven at this time would be inadvisable. His Majesty has secured permanent lodging for you at the villa. You will receive a generous monthly stipend, continued access to books and supplies, and protection. Consider this a gesture of gratitude for your service to the Crown. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Royal Secretary's Office." The letter was cold, official. It didn't mention Magnus by name, didn't mention love or riddles or promises. It read like a dismissal. Diana crumpled it in her fist, rage and heartbreak warring in her chest. This wasn't Magnus's voice. This was what? The Council? Victor? Someone trying to keep them apart? Or was it Magnus himself? Realizing that keeping her was too complicated, too damaging to his rule. No, Diana refused to believe that. Refused to believe the man who'd pressed his forehead to hers and said, "I love you," would send a cold, bureaucratic dismissal. But weeks turned into months, and no other letters came. No visits, no word, just the comfortable prison of the villa and the growing certainty that she'd been wrong, that his love had been real, but ultimately not strong enough to overcome the weight of the crown. What Diana couldn't know, what no one had told her, was that Victor had arranged for her isolation to be complete. The letters she wrote to Magnus were intercepted. The letters he sent to her were destroyed. The official letter from the Royal Secretary's Office had been Victor's creation, a forgery designed to make her believe Magnus had abandoned her. And while Diana sat in her beautiful cage, watching the seasons change, Magnus searched for her. Victor had told him she'd requested relocation to a different villa, one whose location was kept secret even from the king for her protection. The monthly reports Victor provided, detailing her comfort and contentment, were complete fabrications. Diana was missing, Magnus was searching, and Victor was weaving a web of deception so complete that neither of them suspected the truth. A year passed. Diana measured it in seasons. The autumn leaves falling, winter snow blanketing the valley, spring buds emerging, summer heat returning. Time moved strangely here, like the villa existed outside the normal flow of the world. She built a life, small, quiet, hollow. She taught the villa servants to read, turning out 3 of them had always wanted to learn. She cultivated an extensive herb garden. She wrote stories that no one would ever read, filling journals with words just to keep her mind occupied. She had everything she'd dreamed of back in Ravenscroft: books, peace, freedom from judgment. And she'd never been more miserable, because freedom without love was exactly what she'd told Magnus it would be, just another cage. The servants tried to cheer her, brought her favorite foods, suggested activities, worried over her with genuine concern. But they couldn't fix what was broken. Some mornings, Diana would wake and forget, just for a moment. Forget where she was, forget why. Then reality would crash back, and she'd have to force herself out of bed. Force herself to care about another day in this beautiful, lonely exile. She stopped looking at the road, stopped hoping. If Magnus was coming, he would have come by now. It was late spring, 13 months after she'd left Wolfhaven, when travelers stopped at the villa. a merchant caravan heading north asking permission to camp on the property. The servants granted it, and that evening, Diana heard laughter and music from their campfire. Real, genuine joy. She couldn't remember what that sounded like. She walked down to their camp, drawn by curiosity, or maybe just desperate for new voices, new faces, something to break the monotony. They welcomed her warmly, humans and a few wolves traveling together, trading goods across territories. They shared their fire, their food, their stories. And that's when Diana heard it. "Did you hear about the Alpha King?" one of the merchants said, warming his hands over the flames. "Word is he's getting married, finally." Diana's blood went cold. "What?" "Yeah, next month. Big ceremony in Wolfhaven. He's marrying some princess from the Northern Territories. Lady Eleanor, I think, supposed to be a strategic alliance, solidify his rule and all that." The merchant shrugged. "About time, really." "Kingdom needs heirs." The world tilted. Diana stood abruptly, mumbling an excuse, and walked blindly back to the villa. Married. He was getting married to someone who could give him everything she couldn't. Someone who could shift, could bond with his wolf, could bear his children. Someone appropriate for a king. She made it to her room before the sobs came, great heaving things that tore through her like claws. She collapsed on the bed, pressing Magnus's letter to her chest, the one she'd kept all this time. "I love you. That's the one thing that doesn't change." But it had changed, or maybe it had never been strong enough in the first place. Diana cried until there were no tears left. Then she lay in the darkness, staring at nothing, feeling nothing except the hollow ache where hope used to live. Maybe this was better. Maybe this was the clean break they'd needed. He'd move on, marry someone suitable, rule his kingdom. She'd stay here with her books and her garden and her empty life. They'd both survive. They just wouldn't be happy. Diana told herself that lie until dawn came, and when morning arrived, she made a decision. She would go to Wolfhaven, to the wedding. Not to stop it, she wasn't that foolish or that cruel, but to see it with her own eyes, to watch him marry someone else, to have that final, brutal closure, to say goodbye to the impossible thing she'd let herself want. The servants protested, said it was a bad idea, begged her to reconsider. But Diana was done hiding, done waiting, done hoping for something that was never going to happen. If Magnus Silverstone was getting married, she would witness it. She would see him happy, or at least settled, and then she would finally let him go, even if it destroyed her. The journey to Wolfhaven took 5 days. Diana traveled with the merchant caravan, anonymous in their midst, just another traveler heading to the capital for the royal wedding, the event of the decade, everyone said. Shops were preparing special goods. Inns were already fully booked. The entire city would be celebrating. Everyone except Diana. She secured a room at a small inn far from the fortress, paid for a week, and tried to figure out what she was doing. Why had she come? What did she hope to accomplish? She didn't have answers, just a desperate need to see him one more time, to understand if what they'd had was real, or just a beautiful dream she'd mistaken for reality. The day before the wedding, Diana walked through the city markets, seeing vendors selling commemorative trinkets, small wolf figurines, painted portraits of the king and his bride-to-be. Lady Eleanor was beautiful in the paintings, blonde, elegant, everything a queen should be, everything Diana wasn't. She bought a simple dress from a market stall, dark green, understated, something she could wear to blend into the crowd at the wedding ceremony. The public was invited to watch from the plaza outside the fortress. She'd stand with them, anonymous, invisible. One last time, she'd be the girl no one noticed. And maybe that was fitting. Maybe that was always what she was meant to be. That night, Diana lay awake in the inn, Magnus's letter pressed against her heart. She'd memorized every word, every loop of his handwriting. Tomorrow, she'd watch him promise himself to someone else. Tomorrow, she'd finally learn what it meant to let go of an impossible love. Tomorrow, everything would end. But she didn't know, couldn't know, that tomorrow everything would actually begin. Because while she'd been learning to let go, Magnus had been learning to hold on. And the wedding she was preparing to witness wasn't what she thought it was, not even close. The morning of the wedding dawned with a cold clarity that seemed almost cruel. Diana stood at the small window of her inn room, watching as the city of Wolfhaven transformed below. Streets once grimy with commerce now gleamed, swept clean and decorated with silver and white banners. Flowers adorned every doorway, their fragrance carried on the spring breeze, the entire kingdom celebrating while Diana prepared to witness the death of her hope. She dressed with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate and measured. The dark green dress she'd purchased fit well enough, simple but elegant, allowing her to blend into the crowd. She braided her hair in a crown, the way she'd worn it during those afternoons in the library with Magnus. A small act of defiance, or perhaps remembrance. She wasn't sure anymore. The silver scars on her palms had faded to thin white lines, barely visible unless you knew to look for them. Diana traced them with her fingertips, remembering the burn of the chains, the golden eye watching her from the forest floor, the moment that had changed everything. How long ago that seemed now. How innocent she had been to think mercy came without consequences. The streets filled as Diana made her way toward the fortress, swept along by the excited crowd. Humans and wolves alike dressed in their finest, chattering eagerly about glimpsing the king and his bride. Diana kept her head down, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. Each step toward the fortress felt like moving through deep water, resistance growing with every yard. The fortress plaza had been transformed. Silver archways draped with white blossoms, rows of benches arranged for distinguished guests, a raised platform where the ceremony would take place, adorned with the symbols of both royal houses. At its center stood an altar of white stone where Magnus and his bride would exchange vows and blood, forming the mate bond that would tie them together for life. Diana found a place at the back of the crowd, partially hidden behind a massive stone pillar. From here, she could see without being seen, witness without being witnessed, the perfect vantage point for the invisible girl. The crowd noise swelled as the wedding party began to emerge from the fortress. First came the members of the royal council, dressed in formal robes of silver and black. Diana recognized a few faces from her time at court, though most were strangers to her. Then came Victor Bloodclaw, and the sight of him made Diana's stomach clench painfully. He looked triumphant, satisfaction radiating from every line of his body. He had won. Had eliminated Diana from the equation, convinced Magnus to make a politically advantageous match, secured his vision for the future of the kingdom. Victor took his position on the platform with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to power, his ice-blue eyes scanning the crowd with predatory interest. Next came the bride. Lady Eleanor was stunning in a gown of ivory and silver, her blonde hair adorned with white flowers, her movements graceful and practiced. She carried herself with the poise of someone born to royalty, taking her place on the platform with downcast eyes, the picture of demure beauty. And then Magnus appeared, and Diana's heart stopped. He wore formal attire, black leather embellished with silver, the regalia of the Alpha King. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the firm set of his jaw. He moved with the same predatory grace Diana remembered, power contained in every step. But something was wrong. His expression was empty, devoid of joy or anticipation. He looked like a man walking to an execution rather than a wedding, his golden eyes scanning the crowd without really seeing, his posture rigid with tension. This wasn't a man in love. This was a man fulfilling an obligation. The crowd fell silent as Magnus took his position opposite Lady Eleanor. The Moon Priestess stepped forward, raising her arms to begin the ceremony. Her voice carried across the plaza, speaking of sacred bonds and divine will, of the joining of two souls blessed by the Moon Goddess. Diana should look away, should leave now, before the vows were spoken, before blood was exchanged, before Magnus became irrevocably someone else's. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand frozen as her heart shattered in real time. The priestess began the bonding ritual, the part where the couple would exchange vows and blood, creating the mate bond that would tie them together for eternity. Magnus extended his hand to Lady Eleanor. She took it, smiling softly, and that was when Diana saw it. His other hand, hidden at his side, was clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles were white. His jaw was locked, tension visible in every line of his body, and his eyes, those golden eyes, held something that looked like resignation mixed with grief. He didn't want this. Whatever political calculation had led him here, whatever pressure had been applied, whatever lies had been told, Magnus didn't want this marriage. The realization hit Diana like a physical blow, staggering in its implications. The priestess raised her hands to begin the final blessing, and then chaos erupted. It happened with shocking speed. Wolves in the crowd suddenly shifted, their transformations violent and unnatural. These weren't normal shifters. Their movements were jerky, wrong. Foam dripped from their jaws, madness gleamed in their eyes, rapid, rabid, controlled by something dark. They launched themselves toward the platform. The crowd screamed, scattering in all directions. Diana was shoved backward, nearly trampled in the panic, but managed to grab the pillar for support. Through the chaos, she saw Magnus shift instantly, his massive black wolf form placing itself between the attackers and Lady Eleanor. But there were too many, at least a dozen rabid wolves converging on the platform from all sides. This was an assassination attempt, coordinated, planned, and Diana knew with absolute certainty who was behind it. Her eyes found Victor. He stood at the edge of the platform, and while everyone else looked shocked or terrified, he looked focused, watching, waiting to see if the wolves would succeed, if Magnus would die, leaving the throne open. The rabid wolves tore through the guards. One of them slipped past Magnus's defenses, lunging for the platform where Lady Eleanor stood frozen in terror. Diana didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. She grabbed a fallen guard's silver dagger, felt the familiar burn against her palm, and threw herself into the chaos. A rabid wolf turned toward her, jaws opening wide, and Diana drove the dagger up into its throat. It collapsed, and she yanked the blade free, spinning to face the next threat. "Diana!" Magnus's voice, human again, having shifted back. He was staring at her like she was a ghost, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Behind you!" she screamed. He turned just as another rabid wolf lunged. Magnus caught it midair, snapping its neck with brutal efficiency. But there were more coming. Too many. Diana fought her way toward the platform, not because she had any delusions about being helpful, but because Magnus was there, and even after everything, even after a year of silence and abandonment and watching him nearly promise himself to someone else, she couldn't let him die. She reached the platform steps as Magnus took down 2 more attackers. Their eyes met for one electric moment, his wide with shock and something that looked like desperate hope. Then Diana saw the wolf behind him, saw it crouch, preparing to spring at his exposed back. She didn't hesitate, threw herself forward, silver dagger raised, and buried it in the wolf's side just as it leaped. The impact sent them both tumbling. Diana hit the ground hard, felt claws rake across her ribs, felt pain explode through her body. But the wolf was down, the silver in its system spreading like poison. "Diana!" Magnus was there, pulling her up, checking her for injuries. His hands were shaking. How did you look out?" The biggest rabid wolf yet, alpha-sized, crashed onto the platform. It went straight for Magnus, jaws aimed at his throat. He shifted again, meeting the attack head-on. They collided with bone-crushing force, rolling across the platform in a tangle of claws and teeth. The rabid wolf was strong, but Magnus was stronger, smarter. He got his jaws around its throat and crushed. Suddenly, blessedly, it was over. The last of the attackers were down. Guards secured the perimeter. The plaza was a mess of blood and overturned decorations, terrified civilians being ushered to safety. Magnus shifted back to human form, breathing hard, blood streaking his face that wasn't his own. He turned, scanning the chaos, and his eyes locked on Diana. She was sitting on the platform steps, hand pressed to her bleeding side, watching him, seeing him, really seeing him for the first time in a year. "Diana," he said her name like a prayer, like a curse, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You're here. You're actually here." The words stuck. What could she say? "I came to watch you marry someone else because I'm apparently a masochist." But she didn't get the chance to say anything, because suddenly Victor was there, crossing the platform with quick strides. "Your Majesty, thank the goddess you're safe." His voice dripped with concern. "This attack was orchestrated by you," Magnus said flatly. Victor's mask of concern slipped, just for a second. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Magnus's voice was cold, deadly. "You've been consolidating power for over a year, pushing me toward this marriage, isolating me from anyone who might question your influence. And now, conveniently, an assassination attempt right before I complete a bond that would tie me permanently to a mate you selected." Lady Eleanor was the council's choice. "Lady Eleanor," came a shaky voice, "was told she was saving the kingdom." Everyone turned. The bride, forgotten in the chaos, stood pale and trembling, but her eyes were clear, determined. "First Beta Bloodclaw came to me 6 months ago," she continued. "Said the king was unstable, compromised by his attachment to a human. Said the only way to save the kingdom was for me to marry him, to provide stability." She looked at Magnus. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I thought I was doing my duty. I didn't realize I was part of a scheme." Magnus's expression softened slightly. "You were manipulated, Lady Eleanor, as was I." "How convenient," Victor said, his voice turning sharp, "that Miss Harper appeared at exactly the right moment to play hero. Almost like this entire attack was staged to make the king look strong and make me look guilty." "I didn't stage an attack where innocents died," Magnus snarled. "That's your method, Victor. Collateral damage in service of ambition." "Prove it." "Gladly." Magnus gestured to the guards. "Arrest First Beta Bloodclaw on suspicion of treason. Hold him until we've interrogated every wolf involved in this attack. I guarantee they'll lead back to him." Victor's composure cracked completely. In an instant, he shifted. A sleek silver wolf, deadly and fast. He lunged, not for Magnus, but for Diana, the closest target, the weakest, the one whose death would hurt Magnus most. Diana saw his jaws open, saw death coming, and couldn't move fast enough. Magnus's black wolf slammed into Victor mid-leap, intercepting him. They crashed to the platform in a savage tangle of fur and fury. No strategy now, just rage. Magnus was bigger, stronger, but Victor was desperate, fighting with the knowledge that his life was forfeit if he lost. They tore at each other with savage intensity, blood spattering the white platform. Then Magnus got his jaws around Victor's throat, not crushing, but holding, a dominance position, submit or die. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Victor went limp. Submission. Magnus held him there for 3 more seconds, making sure the council saw, making sure everyone understood who had won. Then he released and shifted back to human form, standing over Victor's wolf with absolute authority. "You lose," Magnus said quietly. "You lose because you thought power was something you could steal. But real power, the kind that lasts, is given freely by people who trust you." His eyes swept the crowd. "I've made mistakes, pushed away people I cared about because I thought it would keep them safe, made choices that benefited the kingdom at the expense of my own humanity. But I'm done compromising, done pretending, done letting fear dictate my decisions." He turned to look at Diana, and the entire plaza seemed to hold its breath. "A year ago," Magnus continued, his voice carrying to every corner, "a human woman freed me from chains. She burned her hands on silver, expecting nothing in return. She saw me at my weakest and chose mercy. Then I brought her here, let her into my life, and discovered something terrifying." He paused, his eyes never leaving Diana's. "I fell in love with her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Diana couldn't breathe. I sent her away because I thought it would protect her, protect my throne, protect the kingdom. But all it did was make us both miserable." He stepped toward her, closing the distance. "Diana Harper, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I let you believe I'd moved on. Sorry I let you think this marriage was what I wanted. Sorry I made you watch me promise myself to someone else when the only person I've ever wanted to promise myself to is you." He knelt in front of her. The Alpha King knelt before a human, in front of the entire city, covered in blood and utterly sincere. "This wedding was arranged by Victor, a trap designed to bind me to someone who could be controlled, who would give him access to the throne. I went through with it because I thought if I played his game, gathered evidence, I could finally end his scheming once and for all, but I never intended to complete the bond." He took her scarred hand in both of his. "Because my heart isn't free to give. It belongs to you. It's always belonged to you." Tears streamed down Diana's face. "You said you were coming for me. I waited." "I know. God, I know." His grip tightened. "And I wanted to. Every single day I wanted to come to that villa and bring you home. But Victor was watching everything, every move I made, every order I gave. If I'd gone to you, he would have used it against me, would have hurt you to hurt me." His eyes blazed with intensity. "So I stayed away, gathered evidence, built my case, and planned to end this today. Expose Victor, stop the wedding, and finally bring you home." His voice softened. "I just didn't expect you to show up and save my life first." Diana laughed, a broken, wet sound. "I came to say goodbye, to watch you marry someone else so I could finally move on." "Don't." Magnus pressed his forehead to hers, that gesture of profound intimacy they'd shared before. "Don't say goodbye. Don't move on. Stay. Choose me again, Diana. Choose this impossible thing with me." He pulled back to meet her eyes. "I don't care what the council thinks. I don't care about tradition or bloodlines or what's appropriate for a king. I just care about you." "I'm human," Diana whispered. "I can't give you heirs. Can't bond with your wolf, can't—" "You give me something more valuable than heirs or bonds or tradition." Magnus cut her off gently. "You give me hope. You give me a reason to be more than just a crown and a title." He looked at her with such open adoration that Diana's heart ached. "I'm changing the laws, Diana. Already started the process. Laws about human rights in wolf territories, laws about consent in mate bonds, laws about who can be chosen as a royal consort." He smiled, a tiny quirk of his lips. "It's going to take time, and there will be resistance. But I'm doing it for you, for us, for every person who's been told they don't matter because they don't fit the traditional mold." Diana cupped his face in her hands, feeling the scrape of stubble, the warmth of his skin. "You really love me that much?" "More than anything," Magnus said simply. "More than the throne, more than my own life." "That's dramatic." "I'm a dramatic person. You'll have to get used to it." Around them, the crowd had gone completely silent, watching, waiting. This was the Alpha King declaring his love for a human woman in the most public way possible. It was unprecedented, shocking, revolutionary. Then someone started clapping. Slow, steady. Diana looked up to see Commander Freya standing at the edge of the platform, a small smile on her usually severe face. "About damn time," she said. Others joined in. More clapping, then cheering. Not everyone. Some wolves looked scandalized, others confused, but enough to show that maybe, just maybe, the world was ready to change. Magnus stood, pulling Diana up with him, and addressed the crowd one more time. "The wedding is cancelled," he announced. "Lady Eleanor is free to return to her pack with honor, and my sincere apologies for wasting her time. Victor Bloodclaw will face trial for treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder. And he looked at Diana with such open affection that her heart ached, am going to spend the next several months doing what I should have done a year ago, fighting for the right to choose who I love, regardless of tradition." He turned to Diana, his voice dropping to something only she could hear. "I have to deal with the aftermath of this. The trial, the politics, the cleanup. It's going to take weeks, maybe months. But this time, his thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away tears. You're not going anywhere. You stay here in Wolfhaven with me, where you belong. Is that an order, Your Majesty? Diana asked, a hint of her old defiance returning. It's a plea. His smile turned soft. Stay, Diana. Please. Diana thought about the hollow year at the villa, the empty days and lonelier nights, the way nothing had mattered without him. Then she thought about the library and the riddles and the midnight conversations, the way he saw her, truly saw her, and never found her lacking. I'll stay, she whispered, but on one condition. Anything. Teach me to fight properly. If I'm going to keep throwing myself into battles to save you, I should at least know what I'm doing. Magnus laughed, that beautiful, genuine sound, and pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home. Deal, he murmured into her hair, though preferably, let's avoid situations where you need to save me. My ego can't take much more. Your ego will survive, Diana said against his chest, but my heart won't if I lose you again. They stood there, holding each other while the crowd dispersed and the guards secured Victor and the world slowly returned to something like order. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, political battles, wolves who disapproved, laws that needed changing. The council would resist, tradition would push back, nothing was guaranteed. But Magnus had chosen Diana publicly, permanently, irrevocably, and she had chosen him back. The rest they would figure out together. The weeks following what the city was now calling the blood wedding passed in a blur of activity. Victor's trial was swift and damning. The rabid wolves had been controlled through a combination of dark magic and torture, a practice so forbidden that even his supporters abandoned him. When the evidence came to light that he'd planned to kill Magnus, blame it on the rabid wolves, and take the throne as the stabilizing force the kingdom needed, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in silver chains, a poetic justice that Magnus took no pleasure in but didn't prevent either. Some people, he'd said quietly, watching the sentence carried out, only understand power. He chose to use it for cruelty. Now he'll understand what it feels like to be powerless. Lady Eleanor returned to her pack with generous compensation and a formal apology. She'd sent a letter a week later. Thank you for not completing a bond neither of us wanted. I hope you find happiness with your human. She seems fierce. You'll need that. The council had been complicated. Some members welcomed the proposed law changes, saw them as progressive, necessary evolution. Others resisted fiercely, calling them a degradation of wolf culture and tradition. But Magnus was patient, relentless. He presented case after case, precedent after precedent, wearing down opposition through sheer determination and careful politics. And through it all, Diana stayed. Not in the tower this time. Magnus had moved her into rooms adjacent to his own, a suite with a connecting door that they kept perpetually open. So I can prove to you every single day that I'm not sending you away again, he'd explained. The court whispered, of course. Some in scandal, others in approval. But Magnus had made his stance clear. Diana was under his protection, his choice, and anyone who had a problem with it could take it up with him directly. Surprisingly few people did. Diana fell back into the rhythm they'd had before. Library mornings, afternoon councils, where she now sat beside him as an official advisor. That had caused an uproar until Magnus pointed out that she'd literally saved his life twice, and maybe that earned her a seat at the table. Evenings in his study, talking over maps and dreams and plans for a kingdom that valued all its people, not just the powerful ones. And the riddles, always the riddles. They'd resumed their game with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. It was how they communicated truths they couldn't always say aloud, how they processed the trauma of the separation, how they reminded each other they were real, present, together. One evening, 3 months after the blood wedding, Diana was curled in Magnus's study reading when he entered with an odd expression on his face. "I have something for you," he said, crossing to his desk and pulling out a small wooden box. Diana set her book aside. "Should I be worried?" Possibly. He sat beside her, the box in his hands. Open it. Inside was a ring, a simple silver band with a small wolf carved into it, howling at a crescent moon. It was beautiful in its simplicity. No jewels, no ostentation, just craftsmanship and meaning. Magnus, it's not what you think, he interrupted quickly. I mean, it is, but it's also not. Let me explain. He took a breath. The council is never going to approve a formal marriage. Not in my lifetime, probably. The laws are changing, but slowly. Years, maybe decades before a human can legally be a royal consort. Diana's heart sank. I know, I've accepted that. But here's the thing. He took the ring from the box, holding it up to the light. There are laws, and then there are promises. Laws can be changed by councils and votes. Promises. He met her eyes. Promises bind stronger than any law, outlast any kingdom, can't be broken by anything except the people who make them. The riddle. The very first riddle she'd told him all those months ago. What is stronger than steel yet cannot be seen, Diana whispered. A promise. Magnus took her left hand, her scarred, silver-burned hand. Diana Harper, I can't give you a legal marriage. Can't give you a crown or a title the council recognizes. Can't promise you an easy life or acceptance from everyone or anything resembling normal. He paused, gathering himself. But I can promise you this. He slid the ring onto her finger. Perfect fit. I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to fight for laws that protect you, honor you, give you the rights you deserve. I promise never to send you away again, never to let politics or duty come between us, never to forget that you are the person who saved me, not just from chains, but from becoming someone I hated. Tears streamed down Diana's face. I promise to love you when it's easy and when it's hard, he continued, when the council approves and when they resist, when the kingdom celebrates us and when they condemn us. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your impossible choice that somehow became inevitable. His voice softened. I can't marry you in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of every god and goddess that matters, in the truth of my heart, you are my mate, my choice, my always. Diana couldn't speak, could only stare at the ring on her finger, at this man who'd found a way to give her everything that mattered, even when the law said he couldn't. Diana. His voice held a tremor of uncertainty. Say something. If you don't want this, if it's not enough. She kissed him. It was their first proper kiss, not just foreheads touching or hands holding. Diana poured everything into it. The year of loneliness, the moment she thought she'd lost him, the overwhelming relief of being here, being his, being chosen. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Magnus's smile was incandescent. I'll take that as a yes. Yes, Diana confirmed. Yes to promises. Yes to impossible. Yes to you. She touched the ring, then his face. You're giving me something better than a legal marriage. You're giving me choice, partnership, a promise that means something because we both chose it, not because law demands it. She smiled. Besides, I never wanted to be a queen. Too much responsibility, too many politics. What did you want? This. Diana's voice went soft. A library, good conversation, someone who sees me. She kissed him again, gentler this time. Everything I already have. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. I'm going to keep fighting for the legal recognition, keep pushing the council, keep changing laws, not because this promise isn't enough. He pulled back to meet her eyes, but because you deserve to have every option, every protection, every right. Because the next human who falls in love with a wolf should be able to marry them without having to settle for secret promises. So you're doing this for principle? I'm doing this because I love you, and because love shouldn't have to hide or compromise or settle for less than everything. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the ring warm on Diana's finger. Outside, the city bustled with evening activity. Inside, in this room with maps and dreams and each other, they had everything they needed. Eventually, Magnus stirred. "I have something else for you. Well, not for you exactly, for us." He stood and crossed to his desk, pulling out a rolled parchment. When he unrolled it, Diana saw it was a map, but not like his other maps. This one showed a small territory on the western border, near where the villa had been. "What is this?" "Land," he said simply. "About 500 acres. Forests, streams, a meadow, and a house. Well, more of a cottage, but it's private, remote." He looked at her almost shyly. "I bought it, had it renovated. It's ours, yours and mine. A place where we can go when the crown gets too heavy. When we need to remember we're people, not just positions." Diana stared at the map, overwhelmed. "You bought us a house." "I bought us freedom, within the limits of what's possible." He sat beside her again. "I can't leave the kingdom, can't abandon my responsibilities, but I can take breaks, weeks at a time even. And when I do, I want to spend them with you, away from court, away from politics. Just us. A place where you're not the king. A place where I'm just Magnus, and you're just Diana, and we can figure out what that means without the weight of a kingdom watching." It was perfect, impossible and practical at the same time. "When can we go?" Diana asked. His laugh was warm. "Eager to escape already?" "Eager to see what our life looks like when it's just ours." "Soon," he promised. "After Victor's sentencing is finalized, after the first round of law changes passes, after—" Diana pressed her finger to his lips, stopping him. "After is always going to exist," she said quietly. "There's always going to be one more thing, one more responsibility, one more reason to wait. So let's not wait." She met his eyes. "Take me there. This weekend, 3 days away from the kingdom, 3 days of being just Magnus and Diana. Can you do that?" He searched her face, then nodded slowly. Yes, I can do that." "Good." Diana kissed him again, this time with promise and heat and the weight of everything they'd survived to get here. "Then it's a date." The cottage was everything Magnus had promised, and more. Nestled in a valley surrounded by pine forests, with a stream running nearby and mountains visible in the distance. It was like something from a fairy tale, stone and timber construction, with large windows that let in floods of natural light. Inside it was cozy but spacious. A main room with a fireplace, a kitchen, a bedroom with a view of the stars, and books everywhere, lining the walls, stacked on tables, creating the kind of personal library Diana had always dreamed of. "You brought my books from the villa," she said, running her fingers over familiar spines. "I brought everything from the villa." Magnus stood behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Your journals, your herb collection, everything you'd built there, it belongs here now, with us." They spent 3 days in that cottage, and they were the most peaceful days of Diana's life. They walked the forest paths, gathering herbs and talking about nothing important. They cooked meals together, neither of them particularly skilled, but both laughing at their attempts. They read in comfortable silence, curled up by the fire. They made love with the kind of desperate intensity that comes from nearly losing each other, and the kind of tender gentleness that comes from knowing you finally have time. And they talked, really talked, about the year apart, about the fear and loneliness and misunderstandings, about their dreams for the future, both the kingdom's and their own. About children they might adopt, Magnus suggested, or find other ways to create family that didn't require biological heirs. "The kingdom needs an heir eventually," he'd said one evening, both of them watching the sunset from the porch. "But it doesn't need one right now, and when the time comes, there are plenty of orphaned wolf children who'd benefit from a stable home. Why not give them that? Why not redefine what family means for the royal line?" It was radical, revolutionary, perfectly him. "Your council will hate it," Diana said. "My council hates lots of things I do. They'll adjust." He pulled her closer. "Besides, by the time we need to worry about heirs, Maybe the laws will have changed enough that any child we adopt, wolf or human, will be accepted without question. You really think that's possible? A year ago, I didn't think any of this was possible. Magnus kissed her temple. You've taught me that impossible just means it hasn't happened yet. On the last night before they had to return to Wolfhaven, they lay in bed, watching stars through the skylight Magnus had specifically requested in the bedroom ceiling. Ask me a riddle, he said quietly. Diana thought for a moment. What grows stronger the more you share it? Breaks when you hide it and costs nothing but means everything? Love, he answered immediately. Too easy. Sometimes the easy answer is the right one. Magnus turned on his side to face her, propping himself up on one elbow. In the starlight, his golden eyes were luminous. My turn. What do you call it when two broken people find each other and realize they're not broken at all? Just pieces of something larger. Diana smiled. Fate? Destiny? I was going to say home. His finger traced the ring on her hand. You're my home, Diana. Not Wolfhaven, not the throne, not the kingdom, you. Same, she whispered. You're the first place I've ever felt like I belonged. Good, he kissed her softly, because I'm not letting you go. Not for politics, not for tradition, not for anything. You're stuck with me. Promise? Promise. And there it was again. That word that bound tighter than chains, outlasted kingdoms, meant everything. They fell asleep, tangled together, the ring on Diana's finger catching starlight. Two people who'd chosen each other against all logic and sense and were somehow impossibly happy. Returning to Wolfhaven was harder than leaving had been. The moment they entered the fortress, the weight of responsibility settled back onto Magnus's shoulders. Diana could see it in the way he straightened, in the mask that slipped over his features. But now, at least, he didn't have to carry it alone. The council meetings resumed. The law changes continued their slow progress. There were setbacks. Wolves who left the kingdom rather than accept human integration. Packs who protested the erosion of traditional values. But there were victories, too. Small ones at first, then larger. A human was appointed to a minor governmental position. Mixed couples were granted legal recognition in 2 territories. Schools began teaching histories that included human perspectives, not just wolf conquests. Change was slow, frustrating, often felt like trying to move a mountain with a teaspoon. But it was happening. 6 months after the blood wedding, Commander Freya came to Diana with an unusual request. The human settlements need a liaison, she said. Someone who understands both worlds, someone the humans will trust and the wolves will respect. She studied Diana with those sharp eyes. It's not an official position yet. The council is still debating the exact authority and scope, but it's a start. A way for you to be more than just the king's partner. Diana had been expecting this. Magnus and she had discussed it. The need for her to have her own role, her own purpose beyond being the person he loved. What would it involve? She asked. Mediating disputes, advocating for human rights in council, building bridges between communities. Freya smiled slightly. Making trouble for people who think humans should be seen and not heard. So basically what I'm already doing, but officially... Exactly. Diana took the position. It was challenging, frustrating, and deeply meaningful. She traveled to human settlements across the territories, listened to their concerns, brought their voices to Magnus's council. She fought for schools, for fair trade agreements, for legal protections. She made enemies, but she also made allies. Humans who'd been invisible their whole lives suddenly had representation. Wolves who'd never questioned their superiority began to see humans as partners, not property. It wasn't perfect. Some days it felt like she was accomplishing nothing. But Magnus would find her in the library, exhausted and discouraged, and remind her, "You're teaching them to see. That's the hardest thing. The rest will follow." A year after the blood wedding, the council passed the first major law change. Humans could own property, enter contracts, and bring legal claims against wolves. It was basic rights that should have existed all along, but it was a foundation. Magnus signed it into law with Diana standing beside him, her scarred hand resting on his shoulder. A statement, a symbol. The next day, 3 more wolves asked to marry their human partners. Within a week, a dozen. Within a month, the first legal ceremony between human and wolf was performed. It wasn't them. The council still refused to extend marriage rights to royalty, too worried about bloodlines, succession, the sanctity of the throne. But it was progress. "We'll get there," Magnus said that night, both of them watching from their window as the city celebrated the first legal human-wolf marriage. "Maybe not in my reign, maybe not for decades, but the foundation is laid. The next king or queen, whoever they are, will build on it." "You sound like you're planning to retire early," Diana teased. "God, I wish." He pulled her close. "No, I'm planning to be a very old, very stubborn king who spends his twilight years with his equally old, equally stubborn partner, arguing about books and raising adopted children, and occasionally annoying whatever council members are still around. That sounds perfect, doesn't it?" He kissed the top of her head. "Not the fairy tale ending, but better. Real." And that was the truth of it. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magical transformation that fixed everything. No curse broken by true love's kiss. No happily ever after that solved all problems. There was just them, choosing each other every day, fighting for a better world while building their own small corner of happiness, making promises they kept and mistakes they learned from, in a life that felt, impossibly, like it was theirs. 2 years after the blood wedding, on the anniversary of the day Diana had freed Magnus from chains, he brought her back to that forest clearing. "Why are we here?" she asked as they walked through the pines. "You'll see." The clearing looked different in daylight, peaceful, just a spot in the forest where sunlight filtered through trees and wildflowers grew in patches. No chains, no blood, just earth and sky and memory. Magnus led her to the exact spot where he'd been bound, where she'd burned her hands, where everything had started. "I brought you here," he said quietly, "because I wanted you to see what you gave me. Not just freedom from chains, but freedom to choose my own path, my own life, my own future." He took her hands, the scarred ones that had touched silver. "You changed everything, Diana. You changed me, changed the kingdom, changed what's possible." "I just made a choice," Diana said, throat tight. "The bravest choice." Magnus knelt there in the dirt where he'd once been dying and looked up at her with those impossible golden eyes. "And I want to make one too." From his pocket he pulled a second ring. This one was different. Not silver, but gold, with a small diamond that caught the sunlight. "I know we already made promises," he said. "I know we already chose each other. But I want to choose you again. Here, in this place where it all began." His voice was steady, sure. "The council still won't recognize it. The law hasn't changed that far yet. But I don't care, because this isn't for them. This is for us." Tears streamed down Diana's face. "Diana Harper, will you marry me? Not legally, not officially, but truly. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are the single best choice I ever made?" Diana pulled him to his feet and kissed him with everything she had. Love and gratitude and the overwhelming certainty that this impossible thing they'd built was real. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, and always yes." He slid the ring onto her finger beside the promise ring. They sat together, symbols of everything they were and everything they were becoming. They were married that evening by the moon priestess, who had testified against Victor, a woman who believed in love over law. She performed the ceremony in a private clearing with only Commander Freya and a handful of trusted friends as witnesses. It wasn't legal, wouldn't be recognized by the kingdom, didn't change their official status at all. But when Magnus took Diana's hand and said, "I choose you," and she repeated it back, "I choose you," it felt more binding than any law could ever be. They spent their wedding night at the cottage, tangled together under the stars, speaking promises and riddles and truths. And when morning came, they returned to Wolfhaven, to the work that remained, to the kingdom that still needed changing, to the life they'd built together. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. 5 years later, the library at Wolfhaven had expanded significantly. What was once Magnus's private collection now served as a public resource, open to wolves and humans alike, with sections dedicated to histories from both perspectives. It was always full these days, students and scholars and ordinary people seeking knowledge. Diana loved seeing it, loved that the place where she and Magnus had first truly connected now served the kingdom they'd worked so hard to change. She was shelving books in the history section when a young woman found her. "Excuse me, are you Diana Silverstone?" Diana turned to find a human girl, maybe 20, with nervous energy and hope burning in her eyes. She held a worn book against her chest like a shield. "Just Diana," she corrected gently. She'd never taken Magnus's name officially, couldn't, legally, but people used it anyway, a small rebellion that made her smile. "How can I help you?" "I'm Mira, from the Eastern Settlements. I heard you speak last month about human rights, about how change is possible, about—" she swallowed hard, "about loving someone who's different from you and making it work." Diana set down her stack of books, giving the girl her full attention. "I did say those things. I need advice." The words tumbled out in a rush. "There's a wolf in my settlement. He's not from any local pack. Kind of a loner, I guess. We've been talking for months, and I think—" her cheeks flushed. "I think I'm falling in love with him, but everyone says it's dangerous, that wolves can't really love humans, that he'll hurt me eventually, that I'm being stupid." "What do you think?" Diana asked quietly. "I think he sees me," Mira said, her voice growing stronger. "Really sees me, not as prey or as lesser or as anything except me." Her eyes shimmered. "But I'm scared. What if everyone's right? What if I'm making a mistake?" Diana thought about a forest clearing and silver chains and a choice she'd made that had seemed crazy at the time. "Can I tell you something about fear and love and impossible choices?" she asked. Mira nodded eagerly. 5 years ago, I freed a dying wolf from chains." Diana smiled, touching her scarred palms. "Everyone told me it was stupid, dangerous, that he'd kill me or use me, or that nothing good could come from it. They were right about it being dangerous." Her smile widened. "They were wrong about everything else." "So you're saying I should ignore everyone?" Mira asked. "I'm saying you should listen to yourself, to what you know to be true, not what others assume." Diana gestured around the library. "Every book in here tells a story. Some are love stories, some are tragedies, some are adventures. But the best ones, the ones that last, are about people who made choices that felt right to them, even when the world said those choices were wrong." Mira looked at her book. Diana noticed now it was a collection of fairy tales. "My mother used to read me stories about wolves," Mira said. "They were always the villains, the dangerous ones, the monsters." "Some wolves are monsters," Diana said honestly. "Some humans are too. The species doesn't determine the soul." She touched the rings on her finger. Promise and marriage, 5 years worn and still shining. "The wolf I love isn't perfect. He's complicated and sometimes frustrating and carries burdens that make him hard to reach. But he chose me, and I chose him. And we've built something that works because we keep choosing it every day." "So, you think I should—" "I think you should do what feels true," Diana said. "And if it doesn't work out, you'll survive. You're stronger than you think." She smiled. "But if it does work out, you might just change the world, or at least your corner of it." Mira left looking thoughtful, hopeful. Diana watched her go and wondered if this was how it happened. Change spreading like ripples in water, one conversation, one choice, one love story at a time. "Making converts again?" Magnus's voice came from behind her. Diana turned to find him leaning against a bookshelf, arms crossed, watching her with that soft expression he reserved for moments when he thought she wasn't looking. He was in casual clothes today, no royal regalia, just comfortable worn leather and a simple shirt. Days like this, when he could move through the library as just another patron, were his favorites. "Just giving advice," Diana said. "You're good at it." He crossed to her, pulling her into an embrace that felt as natural as breathing. "How much do you want to bet that girl's wolf turns out to be someone interesting?" "Interesting how?" "The universe has a sense of humor about these things. Remember when we thought we were the only impossible pair? Now look." He gestured to the library, where several mixed couples sat reading together, holding hands, existing without fear. "You started something, Diana. One choice in a forest." "We started something," she corrected. "You're the one who changed the laws. You're the one who made me want to." He kissed her forehead, still his favorite gesture of intimacy. "Speaking of which, the council approved the final revision. As of next month, humans can hold any governmental position, including advisory roles to the crown." Diana's breath caught. "Any position?" "Any position." His smile was triumphant. "Which means your role as human liaison becomes officially recognized, with salary, authority, and a voice in kingdom decisions." They fought it for 5 years, but between the changing demographics and the undeniable success of integration policies, he shrugged, they ran out of arguments. Diana pressed her face to his chest, overwhelmed. It was such a small thing in some ways, just official recognition of work she'd been doing anyway. But it meant something. Meant the kingdom was finally, truly accepting that humans belonged at the table. "There's more," Magnus said quietly. "The council also approved the succession law revision. Any child adopted by the crown, wolf or human, can inherit the throne, provided they're trained in governance and accepted by the council." Diana pulled back to look at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. Which means—" He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the rings. "If we wanted to start looking into adoption, we could. No more waiting for the right time or better political circumstances. We can build our family however we want it to look." Tears pricked Diana's eyes. They'd talked about this for years, about children, about legacy, about what family meant when you couldn't have biological children together. But it had always been theoretical. Someday, when the laws changed, now the laws had changed. "I want that," Diana whispered. "I want us to have a family." "Good," Magnus kissed her softly. "Because I've already started the paperwork. There's an orphanage in the Southern Territories, wolves and humans both, children who lost their families in the border conflicts. I thought we could visit, see if—" He trailed off, suddenly nervous. "If any of them might want us as much as we want them." Diana fell in love with him all over again in that moment. This king who fought councils and changed laws and filled out adoption paperwork in secret because he wanted to surprise her with the possibility of family. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Whenever you want. I've cleared my schedule for the next 2 weeks." "Tomorrow," Diana decided. "Let's go tomorrow." His smile was incandescent. "Tomorrow it is." That evening, as they walked through the fortress gardens, another place that had changed over the years, now tended by both wolf and human gardeners, they encountered Commander Freya. She looked different than she had 5 years ago, softer somehow, still fierce, but with laugh lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Your Majesty, Diana." She bowed slightly, more acknowledgement than subservience. "I have news." "Good news?" Magnus asked. "Depends on your definition." She pulled out a letter, handing it to Magnus. "It's from the Northern Territories. Apparently there's a situation developing. A wolf claiming to be able to split into 3 distinct versions of himself, each with different personalities, different abilities. The Northern Alpha is requesting your counsel on whether this is legitimate magic or elaborate deception." Magnus read the letter, his brow furrowing. 3 versions? I've never heard of such a thing." "Neither have I," Freya said, her expression carefully neutral. But apparently, there's a human woman involved, someone who can see all three versions. The Northern Alpha believes she might be key to understanding what's happening. Diana felt a strange shiver run down her spine. Something about this felt significant, like the universe was setting something in motion. "What do you think?" Magnus asked her. "I think," Diana said slowly, "that if there's a human woman caught up in wolf politics and magic she doesn't understand, she might need someone who's been there, someone who can tell her it's possible to survive impossible situations." Magnus's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You want to go?" "I think we should. After the orphanage visit, after we've had time to process what might start there." She looked at Freya. "Tell the Northern Alpha we'll come, but not as a king and his advisor, as people who understand what it's like to be caught in something larger than yourself." Freya nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'll send word." She started to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you two have given a lot of people hope, including me. I never thought I'd see the day when a king would choose love over duty and somehow make both work. But here we are." "Here we are," Magnus agreed softly. After Freya left, they stood in the garden, watching the sun set over Wolfhaven. The city sprawled below them, buzzing with life, wolves and humans living side by side, not perfectly, but trying, building something new together. "Do you ever regret it?" Diana asked suddenly. "Choosing this path? Choosing me?" Magnus turned to face her fully, his golden eyes serious. "Never. Not once. Not even on the hardest days when the council fights me, or when traditionalists threaten rebellion, or when I'm exhausted from constantly defending choices I shouldn't have to defend." And he cupped her face in his hands. "You freed me from chains 5 years ago, Diana, but you've spent every day since freeing me from something worse. The belief that I had to be just a crown, just a title, just what others expected. You showed me I could be a king and a person, that I could change the world and still have a life worth living." "We did that together," Diana said. "We did that together," he agreed. "And we'll do the rest together too. The adoption, the trip north, whatever comes next. Because that's what promises mean. Not just staying when it's easy, but building when it's hard." Diana rose on her toes and kissed him as the last light faded from the sky. Around them, the garden came alive with evening sounds, crickets and nightbirds and the distant hum of the city. They'd built something impossible, a love that shouldn't have worked, in a world that said it couldn't exist, between two people who'd been told they were wrong for each other. And yet, here they were 5 years later, still choosing each other, still building, still proving that sometimes the impossible things are the only ones worth fighting for. Somewhere in the Northern Territories, another impossible thing was beginning. Another woman was probably terrified, confused, caught up in wolf politics and magic she didn't understand. And when they went to her, when they shared their story, maybe she'd understand what Diana had learned in that forest clearing 5 years ago. Sometimes mercy is dangerous. Sometimes kindness damns you. Sometimes loving someone impossible will cost you everything you thought you wanted. But sometimes, just sometimes, it gives you everything you never knew you needed. And that trade is always worth making.